was very stupid.
That dog of mine, I tell you what, she got me wrapped around my finger.
I'm here.
All right.
Beep.
Yeah, there we go. I think my mic's on. There we go. All right, guys, we are live here with the Area 51 Alien Factory podcast. This is episode 22. The date is, let me look at my computer. The date was October the 16th, 2022, episode 22. Our special guest for the night, David Robertson. You guys have probably seen him in some of the high strength of field broadcasts that we do each and every week for you guys here at Area 51. And you've probably seen him on the track in your races. If you race Be Open as part of the Be Open community, David is in and out of the races all the time. And you see his name up there. You just see David W. Robertson, or you'll see David Robertson 12.
Either one, and I'm definitely special, so I appreciate the shout out there on the special part.
Yeah, either one, they're both him.
It's fine. It's me. Yeah.
And if you ever see Christopher Robertson, you can't miss him. He's got the car that says Hoe Wheels on it, and you're welcome for that. That was the greatest guy.
He is getting a new paint scheme, but it will still be Hot Wheels or Hoe Wheels based.
Yeah, no, that was great. I did that as a gag one time, and he kept it, and he's raced it, and I love it, dude. Every time I see that, I'm like, it's Hot Wheels. So anyway, so if you see Christopher Robertson, yes, they are definitely related. He cannot. We just got done talking about that. There's no denying that relationship.
No.
So anyway, that's our guest, and so we got our regulars on tonight. We got, I'm going to go here left to right, that I see in my view anyway. We got the number one team driver who's skating on thin ice tonight. That's Robert Cook. How's it going, Robert?
Yeah, I'm here. Beep.
Stop beeping me. It's not funny, Scotty. Next down the line, we got Scotty Steve. I'm not even going to let you talk about how you're doing tonight, Robert. I don't think anybody cares. Scotty, how are you?
I'm better than Robert, I guess. I ain't got the beep yet.
Yeah, well,
I'm doing well. Had a good week so far. It's been up and down,
Robert tells me I talk too much. How's your racing going? I heard you had some equipment malfunction with your monitors.
Oh yeah, well, the ball got thrown for the dog, and it hit the monitor right in the middle of the race, and I was like, "What in the world was that?" That just hit my monitor was left and back, and had a gap in between the bezels, but it's all good. I don't look out the left side much anyway. I'm always
No, he don't.
Left, and they're on my right most of the time. I stay low if I can keep it there. Every once in a while, you got to go high though.
Okay. Jeez.
Yeah, he definitely doesn't use the left monitor much at all. That's for sure.
if any of you guys want
to talk about the first race at Vegas, is that what you want to talk about, Robert? Go ahead.
No.
Well, I do want to say, if any of y'all out there want some entertainment and you want to watch one of my live streams, get one where Scotty and Robert are in there too, and Robert's spotting for Scotty. It is the funniest thing you ever see. It's like an old married couple bickering the whole time while Robert's trying to coach Scotty on and help him out and spot for him. It's the funniest thing.
You know what's bad? Both races that I got wrecked in this week was my own teammates.
Well, hey, Robert, let me ask you a question. I heard a rumor that you got wrecked this week. Is that true?
Yeah, I only had really one wreck all week.
Well, who wrecked you, Robert? Let's just call out the dirty, rotten culprit himself.
Scotty. Now, I had did a self-spin. I have to admit, I done a self-spin, but I have never got hit by any. Well, I take that back. I hit today. So I was only on 2 wrecks all week. And Scotty was the first. But
the first one, who did it to you? Scotty.
And it was 106, 7 points or something like that.
Have you been able to get it back this week?
No, I got it all, but I got it all back about 7 or 8 points left.
You haven't mentioned that. You haven't mentioned that to anybody or Scotty, have you, since it happened?
No, I've been keeping that pretty well quiet.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, whatever. Ever time I get on the radio, I have to hear about it. Every time we get on Discord.
Gotta make sure his left monitor's working.
This wasn't a Bubba Wallace, Kyle Larson type of incident, was it? No.
Yeah.
He was on my inside coming out. I got loose.
It sounds just like it.
Yeah, just like it.
He had to check up behind me. So he hits the brakes real hard. Well, I go up to the high side of the corner to let him by. And as we're coming out of the corner, all of a sudden,
you got it all wrong.
I'm headed for the wall, and all of a sudden I see his car against my car on the left side. And I'm like, Robert, why'd you hit me? Well, he says, you need to go look at the replay. And I said, well, I will, because I was pretty mad that he come up and hit me when I was over by the wall. Well, I've been blinking all race, and I get in the pits and I go to replay, and I have my wheel turned left, and I just come out of the corner and just turn straight down into his car. And I'm thinking, that's not what I did on the track. Something happened. And I had to apologize at that point and say, that was on me. I hit you, but it's not what it looked like in my car.
So who was Kyle Larson and who was Bubba Wallace?
Yeah, I was Bubba Wallace. Right?
I did take him out, and it was accidental.
Hey,
I'm hoping you didn't do it on purpose.
Guys, I was okay. So I want to set the picture for that.
Wait a minute. Scotty's got it all wrong anyway. Okay,
Scotty's version out loud. We got to hear another version of the story.
It can't be wrong.
Okay. I'm not sure when he went into trioval, is that the time he would take a sip of his coffee or not? But anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that race I was in with you the other morning, you spilled some coffee. Went out, I think you were in front of me, and you went way up the track, and I was like, are you all right, dude? And you're like, spilt my coffee.
Yeah, he's trying to take a drink while he's racing in the middle of a race. Scotty's 3 wide trying to take a drink of coffee.
I mean, come on.
And so he goes to trioval and he goes over the hump and stuff. He comes back on the track. I slowed down real bad. The 2 other guys behind me, we all 3 of us slow down. Okay. Then Scotty just drifts up to the wall. Okay, we'll go on. Now he's telling me, well, I got no front grip. Okay, good. Okay, so let me go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and pass him. So I went down low. Okay, I can't see him anymore, even off my right side monitor. And I'm coming up. I'm trying to say I'm low. I'm staying low. And then, bam! Why'd you hit me? What? I didn't hit you. You hit me. You're always, that's
all right. Well, so now that you've heard both sides, and I still have no clue exactly what happened other than Scotty wrecked Robert. But so I wasn't there for any of this. So, I like a day later, I come in, or that evening, I come into the room. Somebody says, somebody, I don't even think Robert or Scotty was in there. Somebody says, did you hear what happened with Robert and Scotty? And I said, no. Oh man, Robert's so mad at him that he was yelling at him all morning, and then he left. He left the Discord that day all mad at Scott. Blah blah. Scotty wrecked him, and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, what is going on? And I heard about it from like 2 or 3 people before I actually talked to either one of them themselves. And I was like, jeez, you guys are too much sometimes for me.
On my shelf behind me on the top shelf, I have a dumpster fire up there. Do I need to send that to you guys? See that little green thing with the fire?
We needed it this week.
It's a dumpster fire. I can loan that out.
So one person we haven't mentioned yet, Trace, you've been sitting there all patiently smiling at everybody, but I know you're not feeling that great. We got the Admiral here. Admiral, how's it going?
Drop your beer, grab your gear. The Admiral's finally here. I know this is a highly anticipated episode 22. Our international crowd is getting restless for content, so here we are. But no, I don't. I wish I had stories just that exciting as those 2, but I really don't. The best thing I got was my defective bride last week decided to clog up the drain right before showtime, so that was why I was MIA. And then this week I got sick, so I figured I would tough it out and try to do the show. So I'm not going to be a bundle of joy like those other 2, but I'll at least try to participate, because I'm glad David's here. I enjoyed talking to him.
I have a question. Were you like Randy Quaid in Christmas Vacation? Shitters full? Were you out there holding it in the street?
Yeah, not quite that bad, but yeah, something like that.
Shitters full.
So David, how have you been this week? How's your racing been going at Vegas? I know you like Vegas, and you've been doing. I've seen you track a bunch. How's it been?
I mean, we've been testing a lot, so I do have the 2 accounts, and so when we start building for Contender, which is coming up, we do a lot of science experiments. So I'll experiment. I think there was one race I think you blew by me. I was hot garbage because we'll just try all sorts of stuff, right? There's so many different combinations, and it's interesting how many different styles of setups are really very close, but there's, coil bind, non-coil bind. So yeah, the races have been pretty good. It's been me starting in the back and seeing how far forward I can get, and then kind of collecting the data, and then using that for future stuff that we're about to get into here.
Isn't it fun being a setup builder, trying all that stuff, knowing what you're getting into, or not knowing what you're getting into?
Yeah, and that's why people say, "Oh, why do you have two accounts?" Well, the first account, I did NIS a couple of weeks ago with Garrett Maines, one of my teammates on ESE, and I want to be in top split, and I made top split. If I'm dorking around all the time and tanking my rating, I can't get in those races. So the reason for two is that you can use the second one to kind of do science experiments, and if you blow the engine up because you ran too much tape, you don't really care, right? So yeah, it's the setup stuff has certainly been a lot of fun. And I know, Tracy, you talked to Christopher and I early on when we were just starting in Motec and going down that path. And that's kind of where we really took off, and started working on those type of things. So yeah, it's been a good week of just experimenting and trying to see what works and what doesn't.
Well, the part I like too, when you and I first got together, I found out you have a motorcycle history, and you're also an engineer, and you work on I'm assuming it was race bikes, right?
Well, yeah, so I did some amateur, I got my provisional license to race, but I really did more track days. But I really got into the mechanical side of the bike. So I would work on, I had a Penske rear shock. I had, the front forks were revalved, and you talk to suspension guys and you'd learn about, rebound and compression. And then I get in here with some of my teammates now, and I'm like, well, you know what, like a bump spring really is, right? And they're like, no. And I bust out a picture of a shock and said, well, this is what this does. Cause I work in IT for a living and all that kind of stuff. So I'm a very kind of visual hands-on. So I see that in the sim where it says bump spring or whatever it is. And I want to, in my brain, I need to see it, right? I need to see what's it doing so I can understand when I make that change, what's that actually impacting. So part of the things I would do would go pull up the Penske shock manuals, and they had an oval guide, and it would tell you, oh, you want more loose on entry, make this change to your rebound, make this change to your compression. And I know before the new shock model in iRacing, it was all 0 or 1 to 32, and people would just leave it all at 32. Well, the guys that were doing really well in the Coke series were actually tuning those because they do something. Most people just say, I don't understand it, so I'm going to set it to 32 and don't worry about it. But there's value in that stuff. So yeah, so some of my background, I knew what those terms meant, and I knew what they do in real life. And so it intrigued me to dive deeper into it.
Right. And well, that mentality came from Ray Alfalla, though, because with the iRacing mentality, now you have a working background. Why does it work? Why doesn't it work? That's what you want to find out. But in iRacing, everything either seems to be all or nothing in terms of adjustment. So Ray Alfalla puts out there, hey, it's 32 all the way around. Why? Because it's faster. And you can't argue that because it's a program. But in real life, then you accelerate tire wear, or just don't work, or just makes things unhappy. Right. But at the time, now iRacing's worked on it. Is it better? Possibly. I guess that's to be determined but with the amount of time you dedicate to it and your drivers dedicate to it with the long races and stuff, yeah, you're going to see it. But in a 45 lap shootout, you won't see it probably at all, because you won't even make a pit stop.
No, the thing, if you really want to try this, and I with all the setup shops, and they're not bad. I think, you guys have spoken about them. It's kind of turned the open series into some kind of fixed series where everybody's running the same stuff, and it kind of takes the ingenuity and some of the work out of it. But the real big example of shocks, if you want to see it without getting into Motec and all that kind of stuff, is at the Roval last week, those big turtle curves before the start finish line. I went and put all the shocks to 1. And I drove it. And that thing was like driving a bouncy house. Like when I hit the bump, it launched me into space. I put them all to 10. And if you look at some of the really fast guys like Parker White and those guys that were running that race, they can be really aggressive on the curbs, because if you tune the shocks right, you can have the shocks do what shocks do, which is absorb things. So if you hit those giant turtles, I put it all to 10, and all of a sudden I could rail over those bumps and it really wouldn't upset the car. So to me, instead of just taking someone's word for it and saying, well, I do this, well, we all drive differently. Like I have teammates like Garrett Means and Dylan, all these Coke drivers. I give them my set, and they'll blow my doors off because they're better drivers. So, for me, I still want to see what works for me and my style. We all don't drive the same. So for me, the shock thing is another one of those that you can experiment and go, oh, this matters. This makes a big difference. Don't just click it by 2 increments. Go to 1, go to 10, and then go do a lap. And then you really see what the difference is. And then you can kind of work your way from there especially with the shock.
I understand. I want to interject a minute. I understand what David's saying because I tune the shocks to a lot of how the car is handling, because you can make adjustments to make the car looser or tighter, and it can make a fine adjustment to change how the car drives around the track.
It's a fine tuning tool, right? It can control height, it can control
right.
And really, when you're on bumpier tracks, so let's take Charlotte for an example. You want damping, you want the dampers to do their job. You've never seen a car go down the street and it's bouncing all over the place because the shocks have been blown out and riding on the main springs. Think of that in a NASCAR term. If you took the dampers away, which is what they are, shock absorbers that are to damp oscillation and vibration, and you're bouncing on the main springs, it looks like a jalopy going down the road, hitting all the bumps, right? So
it's funny watching it, especially if one side's got a bad dampener and the other side don't. It kind of wobbles. It does that death wobble,
Yeah, it looks cattywampus, and that's exactly what you're tuning right into. And it is a game or simulation or whatever you want to call it. And there's definitely are arguments about, well, it's a game and you need to do what's, people have done these games for years. Tracy, you know this, where you would do crazy things with the toe that you would never do in real life, but it's faster in sim, so you do it. So I think where people have problems, people that have real world experiences, we would never do this in real life, so I would never plug it in a setup in the sim. But we all know the sim isn't real life, right? It's accurate, the tracks are accurate, but the cars, depending on if you're in the B car, the next gen, or the truck, they're very different from each other. Especially the next gen is very different.
Now, you were just talking the Roval, just to clear it up for the viewers. Now, is that B car stuff you were testing or A car?
Yeah.
Okay.
B-car.
I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I think it would do the same thing in the A car or the truck, because the shocks are, from what I understand, the shocks are all the same code wise between the 3 vehicles. From what I've been told by people, is that it's the same code. They just have removed different tuning options. So I think the truck is like a 5-way shock. The B is a 6-way, and A is a 7-way.
Yeah,
it's the same code essentially.
They pushed it all out with the same patch.
They did. So they all behave the same. Right?
And so, like some of what we're talking about now is kind of like back whenever you and I first met, and then we kind of, our paths diverged because you were interested in this stuff and I wasn't, because you had and I had zero desire. I was just like, give me a set and I'm gonna go race, basically.
Right.
So
now you're up to 1%. So it's
I got to pay to win. Yeah, I got to pay to win, and it was Rocket at first. But anyway, I just go get my set every week.
Yeah.
Throw their logo on my car, and I didn't have to worry about any of this stuff because I had no desire. But as over the last year or so, I've kind of got a desire to learn some of it, and not because I was like, oh, I have a desire and I really want to know, but it's because I just got into the be open so much that I'm like, I think I need to know it. That kind of, it's more like if I want to get better and faster, there's at least some level, maybe not a massive level, but there's at least some level that I need to pick up. And I've been trying to be a sponge and soak some of the concepts up and stuff like that.
Yeah. The way Christopher and I started, Chris was really good at coming up with the initial setup. Like, he would come up with an idea, and he learned a lot in Christian Challenger's Discord. I know you guys have talked about that before, and Christopher really dove into it first. And then, because especially during COVID, I worked from home. So he would be gone and he'd say, hey, I built this set last night, but I think it needs fine tuning. And I would take it and be, okay, I'm going to adjust the cross, or I'm going to drop the left rear spring, or I'm going to play around with track. So there's a lot of guys that are better than me at coming up with initial versions, but I think where I really am good is the repetition, doing 30 lap runs, being consistent with the driving. The other part of it is too, and as we go to like Homestead, for example, we'll take a setup from last year, we'll run it for next week, but it really takes you about a race or two distance wise to relearn how to drive that track, especially because we go there once a year. So for me, it makes no sense. And this is what I love about people jump in and say, oh, it's just your setup. You're fast because of setup. Sure, the setup matters, especially in open oval racing. However, if you're not driving the track the way it's supposed to be driven, the setup doesn't matter. I could give the iRacing open set to Dylan, to Dylan Alt, and he would jump in this race and probably smoke 90% of us on custom setups. He
Absolutely.
would, because
And
he's a better
Tracy's
driver.
got a catchphrase for this. Tracy, what's your catchphrase for that?
You got me, Mike. I'm stumped.
Oh man, come on. It's you can shoot.
Yeah. You can you can give a great setup to an average driver and you only be average, and you can give a bad setup to a great driver and still, he'll still be good.
Yep.
Yeah, something like that. You had a couple of them. You got tons of catchphrases. Like I was
I'm a little slow tonight. Sorry, I'm off my game.
Yeah, you're sick. I gotta let you off the hook. So
and I learned that at the racetrack on bikes, because there would be guys that would show up on a bike with stock suspension. I'm on slick tires. I got tire warmers. I got $3,000 in suspension. Dude shows up on a beater and he just rails by you, and you're just like, come on, man. I mean, so talent is what it is. You're not going to beat talent. You're not. You can get close with better setup and better gear. And where I try to really work on is my racecraft as far as pit stops, right? I think, Mike, you and I have talked about this one race. I think it was Darlington. You're like, how'd you come out 8 seconds ahead of me? You were 5 seconds behind me, because I practiced things like pit in, pit out, braking, where to, how to, all the little things that when you watch the Coke drivers like Casey Kerwin stream, it's awesome. He streams. Pay attention to that stuff. What's his brake marker when he enters pit lane at Texas? I have a billboard I use as a reference when I start braking, when I'm on old tires. All those little things, and when you're around those guys, especially if I've been exposed to them the last year or two, that stuff will make you up more spots than just raw speed. I'm never going to be as good as those guys. But if I don't make mistakes and I rarely like speed or spin or do anything dumb, 9 times out of 10, you're gonna be really good. And I think Bruno's a great example of that, right? The guy,
he does great pit
he
stops,
always avoids accidents.
Oh,
he never speeds on pit road. He never makes dumb mistakes.
He's a student of the game.
So really, that's what I've tried to focus on. Is you got to be fast and all that kind of stuff, but you got to really focus on the finer points of it. And you can, as an older guy, I'm 45 and I'm racing against 20-year-olds, right?
Yeah, join the club.
I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
But that's what I like.
I'm 43, and I think I'm the youngest guy on this call.
57.
So.
Robert's older than all of us.
Hey, David, did that come from Garrett Mashburn? What you're talking about, the pit stops and analyzing your laps and stuff?
It just came from me observing when I would go back and look at a race and go, how in the hell did that guy, Bruno and I pit on the same lap, and he came out 8 seconds ahead of me?
After that happened,
right?
But after that happened with me and you, and you said, I was like, you know what? I was like, I got to start practicing my pit, and I did. And now any track we go to where there's a high likelihood of green flag pit stops, like Vegas, I will literally spend 10 or 15 minutes or more practicing my pit stops to get them as close to perfect as possible. And you'd be shocked at the amount of time you can give up pitting slow.
It's not only your pit entry, it's your pit exit and your first lap around too.
Oh yeah, it's the whole thing.
Your out lap, out lap, the whole shooting match. Absolutely.
And you learn that from watching road racing. You watch IndyCar or F1, they talk about in lap, out lap, in lap, out lap. Those are because that's where you have the most variance of control, right? Did you get into your box? Did you slide through it? Did you nail it? Did you do all those things right? And if you did, I know you guys on here with Stint Analyzer. I will go and compare my in lap and my out lap to the guys that are ahead of me and go, okay, they were half a second ahead of me on my in lap, but I was half second on the out lap. Where can I be better? And I use it all for me. And the reason I love racing in general is because it's so technical. As an IT guy, I love the data, right? Being able to look and go, okay, well, why is he faster than me? What's he doing different? So for me, it's just using those tools like Stint Analyzer to be able to look at that data and go, oh, that's where I really screwed that up, right?
So
right, there's more than just buying a setup too. You go out there, and if you don't have the tools of the trade or the discipline to put in the work, the setup's only going to be as good as you are at that point. It doesn't matter. You're not going to buy wins. So
right.
No.
And like David brought up earlier, it's knowing a track. Where is the line on this track? They're not all the same. Pretty close, but they're not all the same.
Well, David, I think this is perfect segue into our first official segment tonight. This is kind of the chit chat where we rounding our week up. We usually do that for a while and kind of wind down for the week because Sunday's pretty much it. I mean, somebody can race, a couple day races tomorrow if they wanted to, but other than that, the week's pretty much over in iRacing. So we kind of wind down. But I want to get into like, when we have setup shops or somebody who owns something, we'll say the face that runs a place. But when we have drivers, which we love to have drivers, it's Robert's favorite thing to have drivers in here. And personally, I think it makes our best podcast because somebody who's trying to get better, somebody who runs B opens, and we get this a lot. I mean, like Robert, we were in that race today, Robert, we were in that race today, and me and Scotty were in there, and I didn't even hear the guy because I was concentrating so much. A guy says, "Hey, Area 51." He saw a couple of our cars with logos on it. Do you guys make sets? I think he's wanting to know if we sold them. And I didn't even hear him. I just kept driving. And finally, Scotty speaks up and says, "Yeah, we make sets, but we don't sell anything or whatever." But basically, the question really is how do I get as fast as you guys are? And it's not as simple as the setup. And we just talked about all that. So the point is, a lot of those guys tune in, watch the podcast because they're wanting to pick something up. Mm-hmm. And back when I used to do wrestling, and you're going to say, how in the world is racing tie into wrestling? Well, you learned more when you were trying to learn the craft and learn how to wrestle. You learned more in the car, riding with veterans, the psychology behind it, like things to do, how to react to the crowd. Like you learn more in the car going down the road than you ever learned in a training class. And so same type of thing. You can learn so much by tuning into a stream, like you were talking about, David, of somebody who is good and watch what they do, listen to them. They come and tune into our podcast and they listen to you and me and Tracy and all of our guests, that Garrett was on, you're on. We've had so many guests come in and just listen to what they're saying. And they'll tell you'll tell them, it's not like here, put this setup in your car and run this line and you're going to be the fastest guy on the track. No,
they never talk like that.
No, but if you pay attention long enough, you'll find out the mentality of the habits you need to pick up that will eventually make you faster. So that's why I like to do those wrap ups every week as we chit chat at the beginning and kind of kick things around. It gives people get an insight into this kind of stuff to try to help them out.
Well, one thing I was going to say is who you racing. You're not racing the top number one guy. You're probably racing the 15th guy, the 8th guy, or something like that.
We're only racing one or two cars on the track. In all honesty, if there's 30 cars on the track, you personally only racing a couple of them. There's usually only if you go 90 laps green at Vegas, there's probably only 2 or 3 cars within a couple seconds of you whenever you finish the race. So you're only racing those cars, and you want to see when they go into the pits versus when you go into the pits and all kind of stuff like that. But you're not racing everybody. At the end of the day, after 90 laps, it's going to come down to you and a couple other cars for whatever position it is that you finish in. But anyway, I want to move on to this segment. When it's a driver, we're going to call it the face behind the wheel. Like who's behind the wheel of this car? They see now. You used to have a SpaceX car, David, when you were in iRacing.
I did that one of our buddies made.
Dude, that was my favorite paint job you ever had. I love that SpaceX car.
I got it bring away somewhere. It
was
a fun car.
Robbie Howard made that for you, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
I love that because you drove it for the longest time.
I did, yeah. It was a cool car.
Yeah, and then you had the low line car, and now I just saw you have the same paint job, but now it has something else on the back of it, which we'll get into here in the second segment with you. But so I want to jump into the first segment with you and let people get to know you. And I got a few questions I want to ask you, and feel free to elaborate on them and let people know as much as you want about yourself on each of these questions. First question is, and it's a question that we ask everybody because everybody wants to know. Because we all have a different story how we fell in love with racing or sim racing or racing in general. Like, what got you into racing?
Yeah, so probably like a lot of us, my dad, right? So I grew up in Southern California. My dad and I used to go to these sand dunes called Glamis, which you've never heard of them. Go look it up on YouTube. We would go for, you would go a couple times a year. My dad had a camper. We had a dune buggy and some 3-wheelers in the late 80s. So 3-wheelers are death traps, but they were legal before 4-wheelers came out. But we had a sand rail, a dune buggy with a Volkswagen motor in it. In Southern California, there's whole shops dedicated to performance parts for these little Volkswagen motors. So we'd go out there for like Thanksgiving, for example, in the desert. 100,000 people would show up in the desert for a week, right? To camp, and you'd have guys in a tent, you'd have guys in these extravagant, haulers like Paul Tracy does it a lot still, and he's, he has millions of dollars, but he'll talk about going to Glamis. And it's a lot of the same route that like Jimmy Johnson, if you hear about his roots, was there was a guy named Ricky Johnson, a supercross racer, who then did like stadium trucks. Like if you're familiar with the Robbie Gordon stadium trucks, there used to be a series in the 80s called the Mickey Thompson Off-Road Championship. So what they did is, if you're familiar with Supercross and like the stadiums, I used to go to Anaheim Stadium, I went to the Rose Bowl, I went to the LA Coliseum, and they would turn these into Supercross tracks. But they would race motorcycles, three-wheelers, buggies, quads, you name it, they'd race it. And so my dad would take me to these things. We'd go a bunch of times, we'd go to the desert. And, when you're in the desert camping, the only thing you're doing there is you'd go on these, we call them runs. You would take off on the dune buggy. You'd go out to these huge hills, and people would race up these giant hills. So if you look on YouTube, they're not little dunes. These are big dunes. And so from as long as I remember, one year I was out there, and you're in the middle of the desert, and I got an ear infection, and my dad had to take me to this small town with like a doctor. But I'm like, I'm not going home. We're not going home, because it was like a 4-hour drive back home. And so that was really, my initiation to all that kind of motorsports. And my dad was really back then also into the, the Indy 500 and IndyCar. So I grew up watching, Mario Andretti was definitely, someone I looked up to a lot, and Michael Andretti. And I went to a couple I've been to a couple Indy 500s. And I remember, those days. And again, I'm sure a lot of us can remember that, where for my dad and I, like Memorial Day weekend was like Christmas. We would get up in the morning, we'd watch the pre-race show, which back then was like 4 hours long. And it was just something I really looked forward to. So that's really how I got involved in, or interested in motorsports. And then, he was more interested in IndyCar and in NASCAR. So the first NASCAR race I went to was in 95. I have family that lives in Atlanta. So before they reconfigured Atlanta the first time. So if you guys remember, way back when, before they built the dog leg,
when it was an oval,
when it was an oval. So I sat on what's now the backstretch, which was the front stretch. So when I went there, I went to the last race of the Winston Cup season. Dale Earnhardt won the race, and Jeff Gordon won his first championship. And I remember being in the parking lot. We weren't moving.
That had to be was it 93, 94, something like that?
95.
Okay, all right.
So yeah, the year I graduated high school, 95. So we're sitting in the parking lot, and there's a little airport where all the teams are going to, and shit you not, right in front of me, and I'm like, that would have been a golf cart, like a gator kind of thing, was Dale Earnhardt Sr., who just won the race, rolling out to the airport, and he's just drinking a beer right in front of you, hanging out. And then you saw all the Jeff Gordon back then, the Rainbow Warriors were in a Suburban, and they were cruising out of the track trying to get to the airport too. So and then I obviously live now about 10 miles from Texas Motor Speedway. So I went to a bunch of the first races there. But so really my dad got me into motorsports and exposed to all sorts. I love Formula One, and, I did the motorcycle stuff. And if it goes fast, I'm interested in it. So I've kind of done a little bit of all of that, spectating and a little bit of participating.
Yeah, so you talked about going out in the desert. So obviously your first experience in racetrack was going out to the desert and watching that stuff. So let me ask you about tracks. Like when you were growing up, what was your favorite track? And did you have a local track back then? And do you have a local track now?
Yeah, so really growing up back then, idolizing, Indianapolis, right? The Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And we've talked about this, Mike, when we go there in the Xfinity car or the Indy car, I love that place. And I tend to do pretty well there just because I love it so much. And, for me, it's like walking into, for a baseball fan, Wrigley Field or Fenway, right? It's just, goosebumps, man, when you walk in that place. So for me, growing up idolizing IndyCar and the Indy 500, that's probably that's going to always be my all-time favorite track. But, growing up, one of the first actual proper racetracks, because again, like the Mickey Thompson stuff was all these kind of dirt, motorcycle tracks. They were temporary. Was, and the older viewers will get this reference as Riverside Raceway in California. I used to go to Riverside, and they actually did some off-road, on-road stuff there. So they would take part of the road course, and then they would use dirt. So I remember going to Riverside before they tore it down, because the racetrack's been there forever, and then homes would get close, and they go, oh, well, we need to destroy that racetrack because now there's houses here. So Riverside, NASCAR used to do a road course there back then. I think Tim Richmond won a race there, and Earnhardt's won races there. That was a legendary road course in Southern California. So that was definitely one that I grew up around, ironically enough, I never got to go to like the Long Beach Grand Prix, which you would think as an IndyCar fan, I lived in Orange County, that we would go there, but it was pretty expensive. And, we were pretty middle class. And my dad funneled the extra money that we had to go do the dunes and things like that. And so we didn't ever do Long Beach, but we did a lot of the like Riverside and things like that. And then around here, when I first moved to Texas in 89, I was about 13. There was a local dirt track that we went to. And the first time, it was a really good introduction to local short track dirt racing. We went out there with my whole family, my mom, my dad, my sister. And the guy behind us got excited, threw his hands up, threw his beer all over all of us. My dad was about to level the guy, I think. But so that was like the great introduction to like local short track racing, is smelling like beer. You're like 13, why not? But then when I worked at a local establishment in high school, one of the manager's husbands ran an IMCA dirt modified at the track. So I would go every chance I could, and I'd go hang out in the pits with them, and anything they wanted you to do, you go take this tire and go roll it over here and put some air in it or whatever. So yeah. So from a local,
they call that pit bitches.
Oh yeah, I was definitely, but I couldn't get enough of it, man. I mean, I loved it. I loved going out there. There's a little track called Grayson County Speedway up right on the border of Oklahoma and Texas. It's still there. They still run races as far as I know. But the cool thing about these little dirt tracks is outside of turn 1 and 2, there was no wall. There was just a hill. So if a guy went off, he literally disappeared and like fell off the racetrack. And then you might see him come around turn 3 where the pits are, and then he'd pop out like he reappeared. It was like,
it's almost like blinking out in iRacing, right?
Dude, they used to have like demolition derbies there, like all sorts of local short track crap that you can't get away with now. But yeah, it was so funny. You'd see a guy go off the turn and he'd disappear, and you're like, did he die? He's like, okay. Then he'd reemerge, or the ambulance went out. It's pretty bad. But, so spent a lot of time doing that. And of course, I lived 10 minutes from Texas, which is a controversial subject because they kind of ruined that place. I hope they put it back the way it was. But I went there for the first race. I went there for the first probably, 7 or 8 years. I went to all the races there. And then as I've gotten older, it's Texas, man. You go out and it's, we went a couple of weeks ago, Paul, my teammate, Paul Bliss, came out from Colorado and says, I'm going to go to this race. And it was freaking 90 in September. And it's just, I wish they would do it at night, because I just don't want to sit out in the sun for 6 hours on a NASCAR race and
get baked.
Miserable. Yeah, It's not fun. So it's a good track. It's a great experience. They do a really good job with like the fan experience. They've renovated a lot of stuff, but they need to put it back. They need to fix it the way it was.
Well, not just that, but I think a lot of the hate and controversy towards Texas was the fact that they closed North Wilkesboro and gave one of the dates to Texas. And people are like, oh,
Yeah, but if you read into that, what happened was NASCAR promised them a date. They didn't give it to them. So MI had to take a date from the track. So they bought North Wilkesboro. There was a guy in Sherman, which is where I grew up in Texas. He filed a lawsuit, and that's how they ended up with the second date, because NASCAR promised SMI a date.
Yep.
So that's how they ended up with 2, because they sued and they won in federal court. So yeah, I get the hate. I think North Wilkesboro is a great track, and I'm glad to see that it's back, and I'm excited like everybody else is, but it's a business, and you have to understand the business side of it. Owning racetracks, and there's some local road courses that I've obviously gone to on the bike side. Owning a racetrack is a money losing endeavor. Typically, most racetracks take a long time to turn a profit. So COTA is a great example. They've almost gone out of business numerous times because they're not really money making endeavors, right?
Well, COTA is down there in Texas near you too, isn't it?
No, Austin, it's 3 hours.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah,
it is. But those things.
I mean, it's not 10 minutes from your house like Texas Motor Speedway. But it's in the vicinity. I mean, you could go drive to it if you wanted to. And
sure, yeah. I've gone to the first F1 race. I went to the first MotoGP race there. I've been to, it's a great facility as well. And if you're into that kind of stuff, you should totally check it out, because it's a great Austin's a great city in general. You can go great music and food and hang out and have a good time and bump into F1 drivers down in the city. So it's probably not a bad time.
I like to see Rockingham back. That's what
Y'all, The Rock. Oh yeah, I'd love to see Rock.
I think we're all tired of cookie cutter tracks. I mean, I don't necessarily like what they did to Atlanta, but it's different. I mean, there's nothing like it. I hope they don't do that here. They've rumored about reconfiguring Texas. I don't want another Atlanta, but I don't
We
want
don't need another
cookie cutter
super. No, we don't need another super speedway.
I mean,
No,
the new Atlanta is pretty interesting. I mean, it's like a super speedway, but it's not restrictor plate. I don't think.
right.
Like, anyway, man, I had his phone going off. So David, here's the thing. So for most people, my goodness, I got a cell phone going off here, and anyway, for most people, transitioning from sim race or from racing in real life and the love and passion of that to sim racing can be a bit of a stretch because they don't know anything about computers or whatever. But from what everybody's heard about you already, yeah, you have a background. It's about working IT. So how did you discover sim racing, and what did you start out racing on in sim racing?
I started David Kamir's first game, the Indianapolis 500, because of course I was, that was the best to me. And I'm sure it was just, I can't remember if it was just a keyboard. It probably was just a keyboard because this was like 1989. I had a 386 SX16, megahertz computer. So I can yell at all the kids.
Oh, you had a big one, huh?
I did, yeah. So and eventually I added a math code processor later, but I badgered my parents to get me a computer, and back then it wasn't cheap, right? But I really got into like the first one was just called Indianapolis 500, and then it turned into there was an IndyCar game that they put out, and then of course the NASCAR Racing 2003 I think is where then you could dial in what they call that Project Hawaii or something, if I remember correctly. You could dial in and that was it, right? You could dial in and you'd get on there in Daytona and Talladega and go nuts with people. And to me, that was it, because I had a 2400 baud modem, and you were
quick then. 2400 baud modem.
Yeah.
I hear the dial up screeching now.
Windows 3.1. I did the old bulletin boards. I did all that kind of stuff. But so for me, sim racing was when NASCAR Racing 2003 came out. I think then you heard about like Dale Jr. was in it. I know Denny Hamlin and Truex and those guys all kind of met through NR 2003, and there's still a huge community around mods. And I was doing that with the IndyCar game. There was an IndyCar game that came out by Papyrus at the same time, and I would always go find the latest paint schemes and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, as a computer guy, it wasn't a big deal because it was already in my nature, and none of it was in. And back then, you remember how difficult computers were to use, right? You had jumpers and IRQs, and to make games work wasn't just as easy as clicking a button. You had to go and edit files sometimes and make things work. So that's really where I got into sim racing. And then I got my first wheel for NR 2003. I got a Driving Force GT Logitech and bought someone had made some plastic paddle extensions, and we still had that thing up until about 3 years ago. So
yeah, that Driving Force GT, wasn't that the first one that did 900 degrees?
I think so. I don't remember, but it was at the time, it was kind of the only option. I think there was a Thrustmaster, but everyone knew who Logitech was,
Oh yeah. Logitech was like the big, that was high end stuff right there. They were the big game in town back then.
Yeah. And so I had that. And then, as you get older and life happens, I had the original iRacing account, which is Christopher. So if you look him up, I think it says 11 years or something. So
but he ain't old enough to have been on iRacing for 11 years. Everybody knows that.
He's 24, so I mean, kind of.
Yeah, I guess maybe.
So he would jump on my computer and do that kind of stuff. So that's where he got his start, was following all the stuff I was interested in, and then he jumped on it, and then I just wasn't doing it, and then he took the account over and asked iRacing to rename it to his name, and they did, and because I said, look, I'm not using it anymore, but I already own all this content. Why don't you let him do it? And really, for me, you had life, and I was traveling a lot for work, and there just wasn't time to dedicate to this stuff. But, to me, the iRating and SR system was kind of confusing, especially just by the old website. It wasn't very intuitive. Like, I want to race this car on this track, but I can't. Like, it was kind of convoluted, right? It's a little easier now because there's so many tutorials online and YouTube and communities like this that people will help be educated. But back,
and personally, I think the web UI helps it a little bit too. So that's kind of a controversial thing. A lot of people don't like the
I still use the website,
not the web UI. I mean the iRacing UI. I think it's a little. I think it's a little prettier and displays things in a neater way that I think it's a little easier for people to understand as well. Plus the communities like you're talking about and all that stuff too. And I read up on that before I even started iRacing. So I knew exactly what the rating systems were before I even started, and the licenses, and you had to progress in order to race, certain stuff. So is your sim racing been exclusive to PC, or did you do any console sim racing or anything
I
like
played
that?
console stuff, but I never had a wheel for it. So I mean, you do the normal Need
Oh
for
yeah,
Speed and
controller
kind
and
of
stuff.
yeah, Gran Turismo when it first came out on like PS1, it was cool, but it was never anything like I'm gonna get a wheel and a rig. And I didn't start learning about that stuff till later. You start seeing, some of the Scott Speed, I remember, was one of the first ones that talked about he endorsed like a company that built a metal rig. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And that makes a lot more sense. And then you start kind of figuring that out.
So you kind of talked about your history. You were in iRacing. You've been in there for like 11 years, but it's kind of sporadic, kind of off and on until about what 2.5 years ago ish or so. Is
Before
when you really
COVID,
started
I bought a G9, a G29. There was a refurb deal on Amazon. I'm like, all right, man, I'm going to get back into this. Christopher was doing it off and on. I was like, all right, I'm going to get back into this. And then COVID hit, and then it was just like I'm spending. I work from home, but then I would travel quite a bit. So when COVID happened, we're just stuck at home, right? And so it's like, well,
yeah, that's a story for everybody. Tracy calls us COVID babies.
You guys are COVID babies. Yeah,
I like to think I'm a little bit of both because I was aware of it before. I just didn't have the time and the resource to really spend. And I was doing from about 2017, 2016, I was doing real stuff on bikes, and that's a lot of money. Track day, you bought a bike, you have to buy, slick tires and tire warmers and fuel, and then it costs you $150 for a track day. And
let's talk about that. So a lot of you've touched on the subject a couple of times.
Yep.
Tracy asked you about it just briefly. You've kind of touched on it. So, dude, you had a racing bike. You owned it. You did track days. Did you ever? So let's talk about that. Did you ever actually race in any kind of a real race ever? Did you just do track days? Like how much? How far deep did you get into it? Like just kind of give us a brief history, a summary of you and bike racing.
Yeah. So, and I know you'll probably remember this. So I got involved. My best friend of 25 years says, hey, man, I know you're into racing. We used to ride street bikes together. I may or may not have landed myself in jail doing some shenanigans in the street, going too fast. And the police, they frown upon that. And then my street bike got stolen. And I said, well, it's probably for the best. I probably shouldn't be. This was early 20s, right? Really dumb. And then my buddy comes along and says, hey, man, you should come out with me. I've been doing this track day stuff and you should do this. And so I was like, sure. And so what you could do is there's these, and these are all over the country, but there's an organization here locally. They're called Ride Smart. And they actually are training you how to ride a motorcycle on the track. So, he had an extra motorcycle. I showed up. I hadn't been on a bike in 10 years and I'd never been on the track. And they're like, you're familiar with a motorcycle? I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. And so you're in they divide you into different groups, like a level 1 novice, level 2, level 3. And what they do is they had like free leathers that people donated because you have to have full gear. They won't let you on the track without leather, boots, gloves, the whole thing, right? So I showed up. I was kind of scared shitless, and I'm like, I have no clue what I'm doing, dude. Like, I don't know this track. But what was really interesting, and I have videos on a YouTube page if anybody really cares. But what they would do is they would go and put these big giant taped X's on the ground. And so that would be where you would tip into the corner. And then they had cones on the apex. So most local tracks have cones or markers where the apex is. Coda has them. They're those little yellow diamonds that you can hit. They almost look like pyramids that will launch you in the sim. Those are apex like cones. So what we would do is they would take you out in the first session. They're like 20-minute sessions. You had instructors that were assigned to you. They had GoPros on. And they basically would teach you how to ride a racetrack. So they would teach you, you'd have an hour debrief, you'd have classroom sessions, you'd go out, you'd follow an instructor, you'd put a jersey on, they follow you around, they tell you what you're doing right, wrong. And on a motorcycle, it's about body positioning, right? Are you hanging off the bike correctly? There's actually correct and incorrect ways to do that. So a lot of it is are you doing those things properly? And then on the race side, they had rules where there was no inside passing. So the whole goal is they don't want to kill their customer base, right? So you want to go out there and have a good time, but you want to be safe. So you would have these X's on the ground. So you're going into turn 1, there's an X, and you had brake markers. And so as you started your journey, you would putz around, and they used to do a drill called second gear, no brakes. So you would ride around a second gear, but you weren't allowed to use the brake. You just were cruising around, learning the line, seeing where the X's and the cones were. And so the X's were your cues to tip in, and your vision would go to the cones, right? So you would see the X, and as soon as you knew the bike was traveling over the X, you would raise your eyes up and look at the cone and go there next. And you would basically connect the dots all the way around these tracks. And so from the, the very basics of it is as simple as that. And then, of course, just like anything else, you can go as deep as you want. There's a racing organization here that my buddy did race in. I went and did a mock race in a licensing school. And if I had to do like 2 weekends of corner working when they raced. And then I'd have to do like 2 or 3 races without crashing and I would have gotten my license. I just didn't do it. I went through the licensing procedure. I did the mock race, but it's a lot of time and money commitment and it's dangerous. I'm an older guy. I travel for work. I can't afford to, throw myself down the track and break a leg or something. And Mike, you and I were hanging out, but my friend actually, unfortunately, died on the racetrack on a track day. And that ended it for me. As far as that goes, that brings the whole, motorsport is great. It's great until you get hurt or someone loses their life. And so for me, that was the end of the track day stuff. I did get into sim racing before COVID because I wanted to use road racing as training for my eyes and the mental part of racing where, you hear this a lot in road racing. When you keep your eyes up and you look down the road, everything slows down, right? So when you're on the road on the street and you see the lines, if you look at the line, it goes by real fast. But if you look up, it slows down, and that works in racing too. So I try to use the sim racing to actually help me in real racing by, okay, I'm coming into an apex. Here's my braking marker. Here's where I would tip in. Here's what I'm keeping my eyes up, because the problem I had in real life was I would overbrake the corner because your brain says you're going too fast, slow down. So I was trying to use the sim to actually help slow down reality for me so that I could end up being faster on the track. So that was really how I tried to marry those two worlds. And then COVID happened and he had his accident, and that so I sold all my bikes. I bought better sim racing gear and spent a lot more time on that.
David, I got 2 things I'd like to add to your segment here, because that's good information. With us bringing drivers on and expressing how they race and things that they look at or consider on what makes them good, right? So nobody has ever spoke in the terms that you have, right? Plus, we're using the motorcycle analogy in a different perspective. So first off, I'd like to know, what track were you at? Okay, what was the track? And then a lot of people don't know this, and you may or may not, I don't know, but in iRacing, they have tracks that you can tick the school setting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which means they put the cones out in iRacing. I'll give you an example. Go to Lime Rock and set up a test session, and you can go to the school layout, and it gives all the cones and everything that you just spoke of. Anybody wants to learn that in iRacing, that's a great way to learn right there. You spend the time doing exactly what you said. But anyways, I want to know what track you were at.
So there's 2 tracks, 45 minutes for me. One is called Motorsport Ranch Crescent, which is south of Fort Worth. It's been around for quite a while. There's Christopher did like a drive exotic thing where you can go and they'll take you around in a Lamborghini or a car, typical kind of touristy stuff. And then there's one where my buddy was at. He was a member. So it's called Eagles Canyon Raceway. And a guy who was really into Porsche racing bought the track, shut it down for a year, completely redid it, cost him millions of dollars. It's a nicer surface than Coda is. I learned a lot about how they paved racetracks and all the drainage and how that works. And they did a process where they said they paved it in echelon. So we've all seen on the road where there's there's the truck with the asphalt and there's a conveyor, and then they lay it down and the guys that mush it, right? Atlanta showed a lot of video of that. But what these guys did, because the seams, especially for bike racers, the seams on the track, I've crashed because of a seam where you hit a seam and you lose traction and you're gone.
Takes the front end right out.
Yeah. So what they would do is they would do 2 pavers side by side overlapping. So there was no seam on the track. So I got to go out there when they were redoing it. We go out there, and he was a member. So it was like a country club membership. He paid like a $5,000 initiation fee, $200 a month, had a garage out there. So my plan was, to actually go spend money on that, where instead of loading up my trailer getting up at 5 a.m. and going out there and all that stuff, I would just have a garage with my stuff in it. I'd drive up, put my leathers on, go ride. And then when I'm done, throw it in the garage and go home. So that was the plan, was to go do that, where it was more of what golfers do at a country club, where you have your gear in a locker room, you show up, you put your crap in there, and then you go home. So that was really in between bike sessions, there were car sessions. So we'd hang out with guys, Porsche guys. I think I heard Mike Skinner went out there once. He had this old Corvette, like painted in a big US flag, because that sounds very much like Mike Skinner. But what had happened was he had leaked a bunch of oil on the track and pissed off all the bike guys, and none of the bike guys would ride for the rest of the day because he laid oil down all over the place and he swore it wasn't him. I heard a whole bunch of stories about that. So, yeah, so I really got, exposed to a lot of the club racing, guys that were out there doing bikes, guys that were doing cars, some Formula cars. A buddy of mine is buying a Formula Mazda, and he hit me up about building a simulator because he was a bike guy. He bought a Formula Mazda, which is about $100,000 car, and wanted to build a simulator so he could practice braking, left foot braking before he got into the Formula Mazda. So so those were the two tracks: Eagles Canyon Raceway and Crescent, Motorsport Ranch Crescent were the two tracks. And then I actually have you don't let me share. If you let me share,
I'll let you share. Hold on. I got to change
I'll show you
the settings.
something.
There you go.
All right, all right. So can you see that?
Oh, there you go.
So that's me. That's me in the front, and that was my best friend Philip behind me. We were both on Ninja 250s, so you don't need a lot to go racing. We were on 30 horsepower bikes, but really what they teach you is similar to when in iRacing you get into like Mazda MX-5. The MX-5 is an extremely popular track day car because it's cheap, parts are plentiful, it won't go through tires, and it doesn't go through a ton of gas, right? Those are the things you have to spend on. So the Ninja 250 cost me $2 or $3 grand. I bought it, I converted it to a track bike, so it has different handlebars, different foot pegs, different bodywork, different tires and brakes and all that kind of stuff. But you learned a lot. So what you would see these guys come out in $20,000 Ducatis, they're street bikes, and they would wreck it, and then they'd spend 10 grand fixing it. So the great thing about these bikes were they were so disposable, but you still learned the craft. So I would blow by a guy on a 1,000cc Ducati in the corner because he didn't know how to corner. So I'm on this little 30 horsepower piece of crap and I'm buzzing right by him, right? So you learn the fundamentals, and it's similar to how iRacing makes you learn the fundamentals. You don't just get to jump into a F1 or an LMP2 car. You have to start with like MX-5s and work your way up and Formula V and all that kind of stuff. That's exactly how it works in the real world. So that's where it kind of made a lot of sense for me, and it kind of, it translated really well. So I had that one, and I think I had, this here. So the big thing, especially in the bike riding, was when you first get your knee on the ground. So this was at Crescent, and he was riding behind me on a GoPro, and we used to debrief, right? So I used to run this, we'd run GoPros, and I had an Android phone with an external GPS, and we ran this app called Track Addict, and we could actually look at each other's telemetry. I could look at how much speed he was carrying in this corner. So he was carrying 4 miles an hour more. And I would say, well, where are you braking? Okay, well, what are you doing? And so for me, again, it goes back to that kind of IT and analytics roots where I wanted to know, where can I get better? I get, when you'd ask fast guys how you're fast, they just say they can't articulate why they're fast. But if you can look at their data, you can at least get an idea of what they're doing and how they're doing it. And you can try to translate that into results.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that too, especially when we do driver development, and we start to do these seminars and stuff, which we've done in the past. Those are the exact same questions. So we'll pull up telemetry or show telemetry. We do that now. And, a lot of times I'll go out there, and obviously I don't spend the time running the Be Open like I used to, but like Mike and these guys, and they'll share it. And it's like, okay, so this is what I have a general idea what I need to do to be relatively fast, not be maybe cutting edge, but at least I'll be able to keep up. And you guys are doing the same thing. So here's my question. Now, you were talking running with your teammates, your pros and stuff like that. Do you ever do that with like Dylan Alt and them guys and see exactly what they're doing?
I do it during Contender when they have to run Contender. So those guys are usually off doing their own, especially when, Dylan made it to Coke. But last year, Texas is a great example where I was working with him kind of informally in the way that the open schedule worked with Contender. And I think they did this on purpose was Be Open would be at Texas, and the next Thursday or Tuesday was the Contender race. So we would use the Be Open week as a test bed for that race. So we would try, Ty Severa, we were partnered. He joined DSC and we were partnered with him. So Ty would have his sets. He'd run SOF and he'd kick everyone's ass on Monday. And then we'd come up the next week and then we would basically have like an internal bake off of our stuff versus his stuff. And then we let the drivers, and we had 4 at the time in Contender, and we would let them try it. And then we would track through data and lap times, which one's faster, which one do you like? And then we'd pick a path and we'd stick on that path. And that's what we developed for the rest of that week for Contender. So yes, we would, he would jump in the car, he'd kick my ass at Texas, and I go, and with my setup, he would say, I needed to do this. I feel tight here. And I'm like, how on earth are you feeling tight there? Because he was driving in deeper or he was braking sooner. So I would learn through that. And then he would just share a screen and go, I'd say, just do a lap. I don't know what you're doing. And he would share his screen and I would see his inputs. I'd see he's braking here, he's lifting here, he's turning here. So yeah, we would do those sessions. And honestly, that's where you learn so much, because again, they can't tell you how they're fast. If you ask Dylan or Garrett Maines or any of those guys, how are you fast? They can't articulate it, but they can show you what they're doing. And then you can sit back and go, oh, I see what he's doing different. I see why he thinks the setup's tight when I think it's loose. And that's where the whole setup shop thing comes in.
Yes.
You've got guys at 7, 8, 9,000 I rating building setups for 2,000 I rating guys that don't drive it the way it's supposed to be driven, or different lines or whatever it may be. And they go, well, that setup sucks. And so I think, I subscribe to VRS still because I love looking at their telemetry, especially road courses. I love looking at the videos. And the other shop, and we happen to be partnered with them, but Ryko has the same thing where you can look at their drivers and see that they're running their setups. Because the big thing was, well, their 9,000 I rating guy isn't running the same setup they're selling me. So I do think there's a lot of accountability there. And that's the best way I would tell people. And I saw someone in your chat, I think, asked, what's the best setup shop? The setup shop that just doesn't provide setups, but provides guidance. That you can join their Discord, get in a test session, ask guys like Nick Ottinger with EPI, what the hell are you doing here? How are you this much faster than me? That's how you're going to learn. And that's what we would do in real life. I would have coaching sessions. So there was an organization at Eagles Canyon that we would pay like $300 and we would get one-on-one coaching for a full day. They would ride behind you the whole day and say, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, fix this, follow me. And that's how you learn. I don't learn by people telling me go faster. I learn by looking at the data and going, what the hell am I doing wrong compared to this guy in the same equipment, right? Same bike, or in this case, car, same setup. And
yes,
it's faster than me. What are you doing?
Yeah,
right.
And David, you're right about that. And like, so anymore, I've been pointing people when they ask me like if they want to, random people that ask me during races or hit me up in comments and stuff on the YouTube channel and stuff, and ask me about setup shops. I usually point them in 2 directions, EPI and Ryko, for the reasons you just stated. Because Ryko has their performance manager tool, and you can get the driver telemetry and get your telemetry. They provide you IT tools basically to help you get better. And it's not just a setup. And then EPI does it kind of like an analog method, right? Instead of providing an IT tool, they have a really robust Discord with they encourage their team drivers to be in there helping people on a regular basis. You'll pop in their Discord, and it might be a channel with 8 guys in there with somebody on the team watching, everybody watching somebody run a race and giving pointers and tips. And those are experiences I don't think that you're getting with any of the other setup shops. Those 2 are usually the ones I recommend, and not because I think the other setup is a silver bullet, like a magic thing in either one. It's that they're both in their own way offering you something more than a setup that's really helpful. And so I'm with you on that.
Yeah. And I think, part of the reason I know when we were together and then we kind of diverged was part of it is you're never going to learn if you're the big fish in a little pond. If I'm the fastest guy in the team, who am I learning from? What am I learning specifically? Yeah. So the other part is put yourself with people that are way better than you, right? Like, me, I'll jump on there and I may chew your ass out on radio in the race, but after the race, ask me whatever. I've stayed around as long as people want. Hey, what wheel you using? You mentioned force feedback settings. You mentioned this. What setup are you using? How'd you do that? I'll give anyone any any bit of information they want other than the setups. I can't give those, but
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people in the community, and after the passing of my friend, the community aspect of it, especially with COVID, we were all locked away from people, was a big aspect. And Christopher got involved with low line, meeting Paul, and then pulling in the low line, pulled me in. And to be honest, those things were saviors, right? Going through a dark period in my life and having a community. And sometimes you'd get on iRacing, you take your frustration out on, I know I took it out on all you guys, right? There's definitely times where I was in a bad mood because I was dealing with really crappy things, right, in life. But it was an escape, and it was something I could invest energy into. And I think that's an aspect we overlook a lot, is kind of the community part of this, that there's guys that, Paul's come out and stayed at my house now. We went to a race together, and there's those personal connections you make. And we may disagree on a lot of things, especially in the world. We may disagree on politics and religion or whatever, but we all love this. And I think this is the thing that we can all, I can jump on a Discord and we can talk all day and day this stuff, 8 hours, and we'll never disagree other than, I think this setup's faster, or I think this track is better. But we're not going to want to kill each other at the end of the day, right? We can all hang out, have a good time, bullshit, but learn and get faster. And ultimately, for me, I know we use iRating, and I've tried not to use it so much because when I used to be on the bike, lap time, it was all about lap time. I compared, okay, last time I was at that track, what was my lap time? Did I get better upon myself? I was never going to match my friend. I was never going to match the pro guys. And I think that's the other thing too, coming up with Contender and all these pros coming into these B Opens, you're not going to go beat Dylan Alt and Kyle Myers, and you're not.
I beat Kyle Myers yesterday. No, I didn't. No, I came right behind him.
I feel like, if I go back and look at my results the last time we were at Texas or whatever, did I do better this time? Were my lap times better? Am I more consistent? Did I have less incidents? Did I qualify better? What were my measurables? Again, I'm an IT guy. I look at metrics, right? What did I do versus the last time I was there? And if I'm improving upon myself, then ultimately that's all I can control, right? I'm never going to be able to beat those guys. So if you go into that race and you fight guys like Parker White for 4 corners or 4 laps because you think you're going to beat them, you're not. You're not. But you can use those guys. And I think, Mike, you mentioned this, you were running with an ex-Coke driver in a race. They race differently. They race mega aggressive. They take every inch. They race mostly clean. But if you're not used to it, it is a whole different world. And you can learn a lot if you go into it with an open mind and not get, we'll say, butt hurt because you got your ass beat. You're going to lose. Just accept that. You're not going to win. But can I get better than what I had been the last time I was here? And the answer is probably yes, if you at least, have an open mind about it.
Sure. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to, we'll get talking all this. Let's get into Robert's favorite segment of the show. It's probably our most requested segment. I don't know why. I tried to skip it and people get mad. Robert gets mad. You know what, Robert? What time is it, Robert?
It's a good time.
Yeah, it's Robert, what time is it?
It's time for the wall of shame.
Is this the part where it shows Scotty wrecking Robert out?
No. I wish I took a video of that, but I didn't record it.
Oh, it was pretty bad. Yeah,
it was pretty blatant what he did, but
Well, no, I didn't. I don't know what happened. I really don't. I can't explain it.
I know. I ain't worried about it, Scotty.
But I hit you. I did. I ran right into you.
Well, don't worry about it.
I'll
do it. I'll do it to you one day.
You probably have already.
When we first started this, I got some messages from people. They thought that we were like being serious, trying to talk bad about people. And it was like, no, it was like, this is all just for fun and games. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's kind of lighthearted, It's like we laugh about when we get wrecked and we wreck each other sometimes, like you guys were talking about. And it's just funny. I'll tell you the reason I got into this, David, and we did the wall of shit. When we started the podcast that I wanted to do this.
You were number 1 on the board.
Well, no, it wasn't because I was number 1 on the board. It's because
Not according
He's
to
been
Brandon
there quite a few
Burford.
times. I know.
no, it's because
He was-
back in the day.
You were number one for a whole year, weren't you?
No, I mean, it's common knowledge that I didn't quite understand what the deal was, like why somebody was so upset. The fact that I was like, you just race again in 2 hours, right? Like the fact that people were working on setups and putting hours into it, and then I get stupid aggressive. I wasn't trying to wreck anybody. I just made stupid aggressive decisions. Just I naturally went there. My natural tendency is towards being aggressive, and I've had to kind of tame myself back and pull myself back. But people were like, Mike, you're always wrecking this or that. And the thing is, I ran so many races. Like I think I had almost 1,000 starts in oval in my first 8 months on iRacing. It was just insane. And I was like, well, of course I'm going to have a high number of incidents because I run a high number of races, right? And so we get into this whole incident per race. When I started doing the math, I was like, my incidents per race isn't much more than, or just about the same as everybody else's. And I tried to break it, being like you, David. I'm like trying to defend myself with analytics and facts. And that doesn't really help out whenever somebody's mad at you because you just wrecked them. They don't really care. They don't really care.
No.
They don't really care that you only average like 4.2 incidents per race, and that's not much different than anybody else on iRating. They're just mad because you just wrecked them.
2.0 this year, and I was at 2.8 last year. So that's really what I'm, striving for. It just to me, I use it as a metric to say, am I staying out of trouble? Am I being mostly smart during races? And Lord knows I'm not, and I screw up like everybody else does. But it is a good. Now you have to exclude like plate races and short tracks because there's a lot of stuff that happens that isn't your fault. But the incidents it definitely tells a story, but not the whole story, right?
Yeah. So here we go. So this is first we'll look at championship points. We always start with the leaderboard here in B Open because we're all interested. I mean, we are all race B Open, so this is where we focus in the podcast. And Cody, no surprise here. Cody Trelindi is still our leader in championship points overall. He is up to 67.96. Man, he's down from his high of a 500-point lead. Now he's down to 400 and some change. Looks like what 420 or
three something.
426. He's leading over Brandon Schmidt.
That's 426. Yes.
Yep, 426. And man, I tell you what, we've only got how many more weeks left, David? Three more weeks.
We got Miami, Martinsville, Phoenix. Is that it?
I think that's it.
I mean,
there's three.
Unless Cody gets wrecked out,
he's got
of every race between now and then, I'd say he's got a pretty comfortable lead. But it's not done till it's done.
No.
Brandon Schmidt is still right on his heels. He's been in second place for a long time. John Jenkins has moved into third overall. Justin Smith is in fourth with 61.99, and he is the last guy that's still in the 6,000s. Mike Bruno is in fifth place overall, and he is the first one it's in the 5,000s on championship points, 58.94. And I'm just going to point this out, David, the the amount of championship points it takes to be on the top 25 this year is insane.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I mean, the competition level this year in B Open and championship points is way up from where, I mean, I finished 10th overall last year in Division 1, and if you take the number of championship points I had last year, I'm not sure if I'd make it on the top 25 right now. It's pretty crazy the amount of competition that's out there in the Monday night strength of field races this year.
Yep, for sure.
And you would know more than I'm broadcasting them, but you've been racing in some of them. I raced
some of them.
I think I raced in all of them last year. I just wanted to make it, I was like, hey, I want to go compete and race in these things. And I raced in most of them last year. But anyway, we've been broadcasting them. So some other names on the list you guys might recognize that. Look, Tommy Gossett's in 8th, Ronnie Joyner 9th. You got some guys from EPI, Tyler Groff and Eric Schaefer is 10th and 11th. Brad Mahar, man, Brad Mahar's only got 21 weeks counted to 31.
Yeah.
That guy is insanely fast. He's in 14th and he's missed 10 weeks.
Yep.
Jeez. Steve Aguiar, he's in there. And somebody said Steve Aguiar is running a Reaper car now. So
He is. Yeah. He
yeah.
left phase 2 and he's with Reaper.
Yeah, somebody on the team saw that.
Is someone going to adopt him soon or what?
Well, I don't know. Is there like cue the Natalie or the Sarah McLachlan song that you can adopt a puppy or a kid for $3 a day? I don't know.
Matt Coker's creeped up on the board in 24th. He wasn't there before, so Matt Coker's up in the top 25 now. So that's your championship.
Yeah,
points
don't forget
leaders.
about Ricky Yu, man. Ricky Yu.
Oh yeah, Ricky Yu. He was right below Brad. That's how I missed him. I kept talking about Brad. Ricky Yu is in 15th. He is like, I tell you what, Ricky Yu, and he doesn't have any glamorous finishes this year in the strength of field races, but he is there every week, and he is just solid on the track. He doesn't get in wrecks much.
Yeah.
Kind of like what you're talking about Mike Bruno. About Mike Bruno, he doesn't mess up.
He hadn't had a very good
wrecks.
week. He hadn't had a very good week at Vegas. I watched him today. No,
Ricky's really, has improved a lot, I would say, this season, just in general. I know his I rating's way up, and you can tell when you race around guys all the time, their racecraft, their lines, their consistency. You can tell when guys are getting better, and he's definitely gotten a lot better just from when I've been around him.
All right, so we're gonna look now at the incidents and who has the most incidents week, and most importantly, who has the most incidents per race. Vegas is a decently wide track. It's a mile and a half or so. Really, I've been in a ton of races that's went green from flag to flag.
You got a lot of incidences though.
So hey,
I've been in very many races.
It's like you got honorable mentionings, like
well, it looks like he's got two, little over 2 points.
Yeah, I've had 13 starts, Scotty. Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, look at number 1, 10 starts, 57. That's 5.7 a race. I mean,
yeah. And that's Asdrubal. Go figure. Anyway, so I try not to talk bad about people during this segment. I just laugh.
I like Asdrubal.
But Asdrubal gets under my skin so much. He knows it, so it's not a secret.
He's fast. He's just sometimes
you raced 13 races.
Yeah, I've been racing the crap out of Vegas. I love Vegas, Scotty.
He's been doing it 10 o'clock at midnight while you're asleep, Scotty.
I've been doing the noon every day, the 10 o'clock and the midnight.
That way he can go ahead and get races where you're not in there and not get wrecked out.
Yeah, that way I don't have to worry about getting wrecked.
I thought I would see my name on there. I must be doing pretty good.
This is division. This is Division 1, though. This is Division.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
Division 1.
only.
Okay, I'm not in that division.
So yeah, I mean, as Drew, he'll drive the tires off that. Sometimes he'll get back. He'll go to pass me, and I just get up high and stay out of his way because he'll go through that turn so fast that his car's all out of shape and like wobbling back and forth, and I'm like, how in the world can you even control that thing? I'm like, geez,
he's fast, but there's definitely some control challenges at times. But he's on some tracks, man, he's really good. I think if he were to be a little more patient and think this is a 90 lap or 100 lap race and just not every lap is the last. I think that's something we all we all remind ourselves of that. But I think if you watch the guys like Bruno, and Ricky's been a really great example of, he'll give you a spot, he'll let you go, but get him on the pit stop, especially in an open race. You can make a difference there. And I think that's just the better way to go.
So Asdrubal's raced 10 races, like you said, and 57 incidents. That's 5.7 per race. Is there anybody else in Division 1 that has more than that? I mean, Nuno's been clean this week. He's had 19 starts with
Tyler
only 40
Cox
incidents. Huh?
Tyler Cox has one race.
One race and 12 incidents.
Yeah, but I try not to count the one. I try not to count the one racers because that just means the guy was smart enough to quit when he was ahead. I mean,
well, the number 4 guy, that Michael guy, got 7 races and 32.
Yeah, he showed up this week, and we had a few bump and runs together. He I haven't seen him around much. He's a pretty like a 6,000 I rating, but he runs in some other series, I guess.
Yeah, but that's still only 4.5 per race. I think Asdrubal's
this track with this track is a bad track for a good track for safety, because we went a lot of races with maybe one caution or no cautions. Right.
That's what I'm saying. It's been relatively clean, and like David, there's been times like we were at Martinsville one time and I got disqualified with like 2 laps to go and I had like 24X in one race. And I'm like, that's it. I'm done. I quit for the week. I know when to fold my deck. I know when to say I'm done. And
but yeah, but when you're in A class, I don't worry as much about SR. I mean, I'm not trying to run anyone over, but some guys are like, oh my God, you gave me a 4X. Like, dude, stop.
Well, if you're worried about that 4X, well, there's something wrong with you in a way. Why'd you put yourself in that predicament to begin with?
Well, I'm saying I'm done, not because I really care about the safety rating numbers, because it's just horrible racing. I mean, getting 24X in a race, like
I don't do
if
short
racing's gonna
tracks.
be like this, I'm done, man.
I don't do Martinsville and Bristol, not because the racing's bad, but I look back, I think the Bristol SOF had 14 cautions for like over half the laps were cautioned.
Exactly.
You got to do at least one race. You got to do at least one race.
That's not a fun use of an hour and a half for me.
Yeah, but at least one race. You got to do at least
That's exactly what I'm saying. I know when to hang it up. I'm saying it's not.
I go work on my road stuff, or I go do something else, right? I mean, it's just there's a better use of my time than that.
Yes. So anyway, so if we disqualify the one race only guys who said, I'm giving it up, I know when to fold them. If you get rid of them, I think Asdrubal is going to be our Division I Wall of Shame winner this week with 5.7 incidents per race, which shows that Vegas has been pretty clean racing.
Yeah,
if the winner only has 5.7 incident points per race. Let's crank it up. The last one we'll do is all divisions. Scotty, you'll probably show up here. We go to all divisions by incident points. Are you on the board, Scotty?
I don't think so.
He didn't even make the top 25.
No, I'm not top 25.
All right. Well, in the top 25, let's see. We have
Neither are you.
Donahue has 21 starts. That's not too bad. 21 starts, 116.
Oof. That's a lot.
11 starts with 74 incidents.
Well, that Eric Brown 7.
That's 5.5.
He had 6 starts with 61 incidents.
Ooh, that's like 10 a race.
Yeah, there we go. Where's he at?
And then we got Brandon Newmaker. He's got 9 races with 49.
Well, hold on.
There's 5 races at 45. Clayton, number 18.
No, the first one you guys mentioned, I think, is the highest per incident. It was
Eric Brown.
Oh, there he is. Number 8 on the list. Eric Brown. He has 6. Oh, yeah. Wow. 61 divided by 6 is like 10.1.
Yeah, he's Division 9 from Ohio.
Oh my goodness.
Well, come on, he's new.
Yeah, division, and then the guy number 1's Division 10. But here's the thing, he's got 21 starts. So again, seat time is, it's how you get better. I mean,
absolutely.
Right. That's right.
Seat timer, watch this podcast. It's the 2 ways you're going to get it.
Yeah,
so.
David's been giving people some great insight tonight.
Well, we just want to say that just because you're on the high incident thing, it does not really reflect on your driving. Okay, it has nothing to do with that.
And like David said,
look at the plate track or Bristol. I mean, how many times have we gotten 8X out of nothing that we've done? You just, wrong place.
Well, everybody gets a 4X in this crossing the start finish line, the top 10 of the plate race. I mean, that's just like that's a must. That's a must. You gotta.
Hey, did you notice that Curtin made that list?
You did.
Oh, 21.
Yeah, and Naughty
Tompkins. Oh, yeah. Yeah, but he had 15 starts and 43 incidents. That's nothing.
Well, no, he's been racing quite a bit.
And he's got a win in 5 top 5s.
Yeah, he's got a win, Scotty.
And 5 top 5s. So that's pretty good.
He's good. I'm not cutting him down. I'm just saying he's made the top 25 list.
I mean, but look at when we go look at my first year of oval racing. I didn't necessarily win a lot. But my incidents were 4.75 a race, and you're figuring it out, and hopefully should mimic real. And that's what I go back to, using your prior data, right? Okay, last year my incidents per race were this year I'm going back to these tracks again. I know how to race at these tracks. Okay, my incidents should be lower and I should have better results. And if not, then you would have to analyze yourself and go, well, what am I doing wrong? Because I should be getting better, not worse, right?
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just surprised to see him on the top 25 list because he races really clean.
Yeah, I never had any issues with him at
No,
all.
he's good. I'm not saying he's bad or anything.
He could have been an ARCA break, how guys at the start, you get a phantom bump and it's a 4X. And
Oh yeah, I hate that stuff.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that,
Well,
that
so-
could've.
the day I was in where that was a 4X, and I mean that was net code between me and Scott. So I don't know. It happens, man.
So Eric Brown, number 7, is our winner this week for the overall all divisions. Eric, you're Division 9. There's only 10 divisions, and it looks like he's a B licensed driver, 3.16. So he's probably working his way up the licenses, probably new to iRacing. So Eric, if anybody shows you this, you discover the podcast, come watch some of the videos, hang out. And if you ever want to come on and talk about your growth through the licensing, anybody that ever makes the wall of shame, you have an open invitation to come on, hang out with us and talk about it.
That's our disclaimer. You're always invited.
Yeah, you're always invited and come. And I think it'd be interesting to hear a fresh perspective from somebody first starting out on iRacing now and talk about, going through the licenses. I it's been so long now for me. I mean, I've been on forever, David, but we're talking about 2.5 years. To where, I remember working my way through, but I did it in 10 days from rookie to A. And
Yeah,
I
but
really
you did like 80 races a day and didn't sleep or eat.
yeah, my wife started to get concerned about me.
Now he's got one of those transducers on his butt and on his feet now.
Those butt kickers I've had one for a long time. Those things are great, man.
Yeah, it makes Robert regular.
Makes you regular too. First time you used it, you had to get up to go to the bathroom. Yeah.
Yes, testing it.
Is that what you did on your pit stop?
Yeah.
Hoping for a caution so you get the wave around?
Well, Scotty better not get one or it'll spill his coffee.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. His coffee will start going everywhere. He'll wreck all of us.
On my rig, I have like a metal mouse pad attachment, and I put my phone on it. And sometimes during the race, the butt kicker's going so much, I'll hear it fall off and hit the wall, and it'll scare the crap out of me because I'll hear a thud. I'll be like,
I can't turn my butt kicker up as loud as Mikey can. Mine gets hot and shuts off.
Never mind. I'm not going to talk anyway. I'm not with damn butt kickers, but I like the name brand, but I think they're a bit overpriced. But anyway, so David, I was in that race with you the other day when Scotty took that drink of coffee, and I know we talked about it earlier, but dude, I was right behind you guys watching it. And I watched him do whatever he did and almost killed you or something, or you and somebody else.
He was far enough ahead, but he
happened?
swerved and lost.
I know.
Oh,
and I was back right behind you guys, and I saw it all happen. And I was in Discord with him. And whenever I heard him
wait. I didn't swerve. I was drinking my coffee with my left hand, and I had the right hand on the wheel, and I didn't feel the car getting loose. And next thing you know, I'm going sideways, and I'm like, whoa.
Right.
And I had to set my coffee down real quick and catch the car.
Scotty, I got one word for you. Decaf.
Yeah. Well,
I was glad I didn't get run over by anybody, but that was scary for me. Yeah, I was like, wow.
Scary for you. The fact that everybody knows you're sitting there drinking coffee with one hand and got your G29 the other cruising around while you're racing 2 and 3 wide, that scares everybody else.
If he was a smoker, he'd be having taking a sip and smoking a cigarette and just sitting there going down I-40 or something.
Hey, Doug used to do that. He used to smoke while he was racing and in VR. And I remember one time the cigarette butt dropped or something and burned him. Or caught his headset on fire. I can't remember. I can't remember the exact details, but it was hilarious. I started laughing, and that reminds me of Scotty and the coffee. But anyway, Scotty, I was with you in Discord, and when he said that, David, I was just thinking, I was like, Scotty, stop. Don't tell anybody that. I was like, don't tell people you're sitting there drinking coffee while you're trying to race. And I was like, no. Don't do it.
You say that for the coffee.
You don't know you take drinks of your drink whenever you're driving down the track?
No,
under
we
caution.
don't. I don't.
Under caution.
No.
Under caution.
Under caution. Yes.
Sometimes I get thirsty on the straightaway. So.
No. Under caution, Scott.
Go watch Steel Horse, Jonathan Cadell on his Twitch stream. He has a counter how many beers he's had in a race.
Oh yeah, there's a stat. There's some good stream in there.
He's awesome.
All right.
If you think I'm bad drinking coffee, you ought to. Well, some of these guys are probably drinking beer after beer.
Oh, they
while
are
they're
right.
racing.
The night
Oh
racing
yeah,
is
the
worse because
midnight
of
races on a Saturday night. Oh
Yeah, you don't want to join those.
No, it's like a
Mhm.
frat party in the middle of a track or something. iRacing.
Right.
It
Anyway,
is sometimes after 5 o'clock when they already stopped in for a beer when you're on the way home or something. And that, yep.
all right. So David, let's move into the home stretch and a second focus on you. And we talked about your history.
What
your
about the
motorcycle-
wall of shame?
Yeah, we already went through the wall of shame, through the motorcycle racing, all that cool stuff that you do, leading up to the time where you and I met, and that's where I want to pick up today. You and I met at about the same time. We both got into iRacing pretty hot and heavy about 2.5 years ago, and so kind of walk people through your journey from that point, and then tell us where you're at now. Where did that path take you, and where did you end up, and where you at today?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think Christopher befriended you in a race, and then I think you had a Discord and we jumped in there, and
Yeah.
all of us were learning, right? So we'd all see who left their spotter open, if we could swipe a setup.
We were doing
We did all that kind of.
and we would get a high race and see if there was like 2 or 3 people in there with like 3,000 iRings. We only had like 1,500 back then.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be like, hey David, you go to that guy, I'll go to this guy. Like we could get all 3 of them. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, we were all, I had VRS and we buy setups, and we started doing stuff with David Lamb, with Rocket, and I think we were all wanting to get better, and some of that was certainly in the Open Series back then. And I think since then, iRacing's hired like Matt Holden and those guys. The base setups are a lot better than they used to be,
Especially the open versions. They got open versions.
But back then, those setups were pretty garbage, and so you basically had to go use VRS or somebody, and there wasn't a lot of other people. So, when we would hang out, it was like, we were still learning. I got called Missile or Rocket or whatever by that streamer, and we'd all have a good time. And
it was like Rocket Man or Miss. I can't remember.
So,
that was hilarious.
So we'd just be in there learning together, and then I think eventually what happened is Christopher was really had dove into working with Christian Chandler's Discord before he got hired by iRacing. Was trying to learn. That's when we talked to Tracy about Motec and building setups and getting more serious. And so I think that's where, our paths kind of diverged.
Right. Because I wanted to focus on driving only and have somebody give me a set. Yeah. And you guys really started. I mean, you were like, hey, Mike, I'm going to set this next cloud thing. And like, we can start. And I'm like, dude, what? I was like, give me a set. I just want to race. Yeah.
I had a way to share telemetry between us. I mean, I was really wanting to,
and at that point I had zero interest in that. I was like, I just want to give me a set and teach me how to race it,
Right. And so, with him, he really kind of met, like I mentioned, he met Paul Bliss, who was with Lowline, and started working with them, and then kind of was a recruit with Lowline. And then, like I said, we worked on him as a team. He would kind of do the first version. He'd say, I learned all this stuff on spring split in the rear, and I'm going to do this. And then he'd say, hey, here's the set. He knew I had time during the day, which is nice. My rig I'm at my work where I work, and then my rig is literally like 4 feet this way. I would, when I'm in between meetings for an hour, I would jump on and do a 30-lap run in a test session. I would, just put some laps down, and I would look at telemetry and look at ride heights, and then I would make a change and do another 30. And so by the time he got home from work in the evening, I'd say, hey, I got a new version for us. Let's try it. And that's how we really started. We worked really well as a team to get into that building mindset. And then, so like I said, he was really good at creating the initial versions. And I like to think I was pretty good at kind of fine tuning the nuances of it. And then we met guys like Dakota Ehrman, who was really good at building sets, and Chris Cornell. And those guys were really good drivers and really good set builders. And so we learned a lot from them. Like I mentioned, if you really want to learn and expand, be the small fish in a big pond. Be with guys that are way better than you, because you're going to learn a lot more that way than by being the best guy on your team. There's nowhere to go, right? And we were all kind of at the same level, and so it just worked out really well that Chris befriended, all these people, and then I got pulled in, and then we just started working together, and then eventually I joined Lowline, and Dakota and Chris, and we were Chris Cornell. We were all on Lowline, and we would all work together. And Chris Cornell went through the Road to Pro process, and I would help out. Chris would be like, it was like his crew chief all of Road to Pro this year for the first round. And so we just started getting more involved on the Road to Pro and Pro side. Chris even did some work with a driver and Coke for a little bit, where he would kind of help. So all that being said, we just kind of really, went down the path with Lowline. And then here a few weeks ago, Garrett Mashburn, who he had on, and Paul Bliss, and a bunch of us from Lowline have joined Elliott Sadler Esports. We were already aligned, and so we kind of had two sets of infrastructures, you know, with where we kept data and timesheets and things. And so it didn't make sense to keep maintaining the same stuff in two places. So it really made sense to eventually kind of combine forces. So we're with ESE, the new paint on the car, and yeah, so that's kind of where we're at now. We're getting ready.
And ESC for anybody that didn't catch it the first time is Elliott Sadler Esports. Elliott Sadler got into esports and created an esports team. So
Rachel Hunt's with that team, right?
Yes, she is, and Garrett Maines and a bunch of really, you know, Seth Ryder, who he's been on the SOF race. He actually is the co-owner of ESC with Elliott. So it's a, you know, they have a great, you know, organization over there. And Elliott, you know, we're in a Facebook chat, and he'll chime in with stuff, and you know, we see him in Discord, and we'll see his kid get on there and jump in and do some races, and so he's pretty involved with it as well, which is pretty cool because I remember watching him, you know, go win Bristol in 01 or whatever it was. I remember, you know, when he was teammates with Dale Jarrett, who I really liked back then with Robert Yates Racing. So I was always a big fan of Elliott and Dale Jarrett and those guys. So it's kind of cool now to be on a team. And really the goal is to, you know, work with, so we got two guys in through round 2 of Road Pro that are in the contender. And then we'll have a couple guys. If you don't make the top 20 in points in Coke, you have to go back, bottom 20 have to go back through contender to make it to Coke for next year. So what you'll be seeing and be open in the next couple of weeks when the winter schedule comes out and when they announce the contender schedule is you probably won't even make top split, right? Because unless your I rating is like 6 or 7K, you're going to have 35 guys that are 6K and above that are basically pro drivers that are practicing for the contender races, which will then determine who makes it into Coke. So last year we got 4 guys into Coke, which we only had 4 guys in contender. We got all 4 of them through. Dylan won two races in contender, one at Dover and one at Darlington. So, you know, I would say, you know, at my age and my skill level, I'm never going to be a pro driver, nor do I have the time and energy to put into it. But being associated with those guys, building the camaraderie, especially younger guys, is different vibe, you know, stuff they're into. We hang out and have a good time, and we build sets and we have fun. And those guys getting into Coke is a big deal for them. You have guys that have aspirations of being on the track. If you watch the Xfinity race, Raja Karuth and Parker Retzlaff, who were iRacing guys that were in Coke, they were running in Xfinity. Caden Honeycutt was running the truck race at Talladega. He lives not far from me. He's on Legacy. I mean, so you have this cross-pollination of these younger guys that have the skill and ability that are using iRacing to get the attention of people like Elliott Sadler and Dale Earnhardt Jr. and people in the industry, and are using this as a way in. We also have a guy on our team who's an engineer at RCR. So he's at the War Room every NASCAR Sunday, and he came up, he won a Coke race, and he was with Lowline, and now he does this for a living. So really the cross-pollination, and you don't get this in any other sport. And I think that's one of the reasons I love motorsport is, you know, I was during COVID, Joseph Newgarden, IndyCar champion, put up a room and said, we're running IndyCars at Spa, and I made it in. I was in there with Tony Kanaan and Joseph Newgarden and Sage Karam and Will Power. And you're racing with guys who have won the Indy 500, that have won championships. And I was so slow that Sage and Will Power were leading the race, and Will Power gets on there in his Australian accent. He's like, David, we're coming to lap you, get out of the way. And I almost wrecked them both. And no, but you can't do that with Tom Brady or with Aaron Judge or anyone. And you're never going to be able to rub elbows with your heroes. And so I think that's what's really interesting. And so I think getting into the pro side, you know, the little bit that I really help just build B-car setups and tests. I don't have the time to be on a box per se. I've helped a little bit here and there during Road to Pro, but, you know, to see the effort that I call them kids, right? You know, Dylan's like 18 and a lot of these guys are early 20s, the amount of time and effort and how much it means to them, they have the whole rest of their life ahead of them. And these, you know, getting into Coke or any of these other, you know, career opportunities, it means a lot to them. So to be able to be kind of maybe a bit of a mentor, the old guy that, you know, when stuff happened and goes sideways, you can look, man, don't focus on that. It's a lot of coaching, right? It's a lot of keep your cool. Don't, you know, let's focus on what's important. There's a lot of parallels to real life. And I think that's the part I really have come to enjoy through COVID. and all the different stuff that we've all, that we've dealt with my, the track day stuff and my friend passing away. For me, it was a good way to build a community and help guys that really care a lot about this. And so, yeah, when you see those guys out there, they're not just out there to turn a lap and win a race. They're putting in thousands of laps.
Well, Jeremy Mayfield was on there last night racing.
Yeah, I was in a race. I was in a race at the Roval with Ricky Carmichael, who I used to go watch motocross.
Yeah, I raced a race with him the other day too. I was like, it took me a second. I didn't really think anything of it. And it was like, you know who Ricky Carmichael is, don't you? They said, think motocross. I was like, oh yeah, dude. I used to have the Ricky Carmichael video games on PlayStation and stuff.
Yeah.
He was great. And then he's in here iRacing now. So
I asked him if it made me old if I used to root for Jeremy McGrath. Anyone that followed motocross remember him?
Yeah, I remember him. They used to have a big battle between the two.
Yeah, there's no other place that you rub elbows with your heroes and people that you idolize or people that you look up to that are these, amazing at what they did. But then to be in a race and hear Tony Kanaan drop an F-bomb because a guy ran him over into pit box. And I'm like, hey, that happens to me. Like, for me,
I think the reason is, David, is because, I'm trying to think of any other sport that you can simulate like that in your home that's so realistic it's not perfect. We all admit it's a simulator. No. It's not, but it's close. It's really close. And it actually, I remember Dale Jr. talking about how when he got into it really early on with NR 2003, that he would go in there and load up a track when he was getting ready to go somewhere. He said it would cut his learning time in half. He would go to the track and do it on the practice day before the race or whatever, a couple of days before, whenever they got in there, that it would literally cut his time of learning that it would normally take in half. And so when it has real world advantage to them in the real life, then you get that mixing. And you're right. There's no other sport that has this. And just think, because you can set in a computer, you can have VR, you can have triples, you have an ultra ride, like whatever you got, and you can have a real wheel, pedals, like every, and it's, you can have the same kind of sitting environment and like you're in a car. So yeah, that's awesome, and that's why I love it so much.
Yeah, one of these dadays we'll get Junior in here to explain us how he got started.
We'll get our people to talk to his people.
I've seen like Ty Gibbs show up, I think it was Nashville week. I saw Ty Gibbs in a practice room that I had opened. I opened a lot of practice rooms before the race, and there's Ty Gibbs and Ryan Vargas and, real life drivers that'll drop in because, to your point, the tracks are laser scanned. The cars are not comparable. Let's just be honest, they're not. But again, the same reason I try to use it for the track bike stuff, not even like the tracks I rode weren't in iRacing, but the same fundamentals apply, the same mental aspects of the sport, right? Knowing your breaking point, knowing the visual cues, knowing this billboard or this part of the wall, or what am I using? All of those things still translate, right? Even though the cars may be different, when you get there, the visuals are still there. And I think that's why you see a lot of people do, obviously they have the driver and loop simulators, like the professional simulators, but then in your home, you can, drivers can do that in their spare time. So that's the part I love about it. And then, the working with the drivers that are really good. And then selfishly, it helps me get better as a driver in iRacing.
And so you learn more cuss words too when you're at
Robert. I'm a good influencer.
Robert, I teach them cuss words. Look gray hair. I teach them cuss words.
So David, let me touch on something a second ago. You talked about, you guys have people, the Road to Pro, the Coke series, but you said you focus on Xfinity. And so I want to kind of bring that out, like when you're talking about a team at your level, because you're on low line, you had some Coke drivers, you've merged with ESE, so that means that if in order for a person to get the Coke series, you have to get them through Road to Pro, then you have to get them through Contender.
2 rounds of Road to Pro.
Right. But what I'm saying is Road to Pros and trucks, right? So you get them through the Road to Pro and the truck.
It's all considered Road to Pro. So there's Road to Pro round 1, which anyone can enter. Like I did the first race, and there's a point, there's a drop week and a point sheet.
Then there's like the cut of 70.
And then it's 70, which they just finished, right?
And then it's 20.
And then it's 20. And then that 20 will compete against the bottom 20 from Coke in the
Xfinity cars, and then you move to Coke, which is the A car. So where I'm getting with that is that you said, I focus in Xfinity, and we focus in Xfinity or Be Open here in our team mostly, but it takes it takes a lot of time to really specialize in a car, driving and building sets, both. I mean, because the cars drive differently. So, so it takes a lot to focus and specialize. And so if you're going, if somebody's out there listening and you're like, you know what, I would like to try Road to Pro. My I ratings, I'm trying to get my I rating up to, like 5,000-6,000. I can try to get one of the top couple splits or so. And I would like to go down that road. In order to have a team that is capable of getting someone completely through, you can't just have a team that runs Be Open, right? You got to have a team that has people that, and so it's got to be a big group. You got to have a team that has people that focus on the trucks.
Yep.
Right. Then you gotta have, because you got to have people building good sets for the trucks, people help coach guys and help get them, mentor them through. And then once they get through that, they get the top 20. Then you get the bottom 20 from coach, like you talked about. Now you got 40 guys in what we call the contender series, what iRacing calls a contender series. They're racing Xfinity. That's where you're specializing. So
Yep.
I'm sure that you're one of the leaders in that part of the process as far as
Not a leader, but I'm there, right?
well, you're helping build sets.
I'm helping.
Right? Yeah,
Well,
you're
and
helping build sets. When I
Yeah.
say a leader, I mean you're the guy that stays in Xfinity. You race and be
Right.
and then Garrett is running the coach side of the things or with you guys. And so then his focus is there and takes the guys there when they get to that point. So I guess speak to that a little bit. The fact that like what it takes is a complete package for a team to be able to offer that to someone from start to finish.
Yeah, and I think, obviously Lowline had been around for a long time and ESC has been here for a couple of years, but I think what they have is an infrastructure. I mentioned that. So you can't do any of this without data. So timesheets and being able to compare driver A versus driver B, setup A versus setup B. You can't just go out there and do a bunch of laps and go, well, I'm fast, let's send it. I mean, you can, but you're not going to get far. So we'll throw out test rooms, you set up the proper weather, you do all the right stuff, right? You do all those things. And I do that when I throw up the Be Open rooms for everybody. I'm going off the right weather that we've figured out that we think is going to be accurate for the week. And more times than not, it's pretty accurate. So yeah, the infrastructure wise, you got to have a team around that does that. And then of course you got to have kind of a library of setups helps, right? So these guys have been doing this for years. So we can say, and the truck code wise hasn't changed fundamentally in a long time, other than like the shock edition. Same thing with the B car they added.
No, but do you guys have like a truck sub team type deal, guys that specialize and focus on trucks?
Yeah.
They
race the SOFs in the truck every Monday night, just like we race Be Open SOF.
Yep.
And they will build setups, and in that way they'll have a catalog of all the tracks. And then when they say, here's the schedule for Contender or for Road to Pro, you know it in advance, and you could go, okay, the day and time might be different, the weather might be different, but we have a baseline we can start with. And then if you say, oh, last year we were really good there, like, for example, we're going to go to Homestead next week, and that was one of the races in Contender. We were hot garbage in Contender there. And so now we're like, we just say, we're not even using that setup. We're starting over. So the process has already begun because we have an idea that maybe some of the same tracks last year will be in the schedule this year. So you start focusing on that. So yeah, you need guys that focus on all the cars, because if you're starting Road to Pro, if you don't get through the trucks, you're not getting to the B car. So being a B car guy doesn't matter, right? So you got to get through the trucks. You got to have guys that know that truck, that how to build that truck. It's different than the B car, different than the A car, drives differently. I think they're easier because they're less power. You basically, like Michigan's a plate track in a truck, right?
Yeah.
You don't lift. But there's still nuances that go into driving and setting it up. So those guys will run all the SOF races. If you're wanting to do this, you need to, if you're really serious, you're not going to get far. You're not going to probably make it a Contender unless your I rating's about 5,000. The way the
minimum
stack up, because if you go look at the points list, you might be in the 14th split, and you win, and you will get less points than the guy that finishes dead last in top split. So the way that the points work, you don't want to be in 15th split, right? You want to be in the top 7,
2 or 3 or so. I mean,
7 or 8, and you've got a shot. Because you got to remember, at the start of the year, there's 3,000 guys, I think, this year that were started Road to Pro at Daytona.
Right.
Yeah. So you've got 30 splits, right? Or whatever it was. It was crazy. So you've got to put the time in. You know, if you want it, if you think you can make it, you've got to do the trucks first. You got to spend all your time in the trucks because that's the car you got to master. If you make it to contender, then yeah, you definitely need a team that knows the B car because it does drive a lot differently. The setups are a little different. There's packers in the B car. There's not in the truck. Right? Or coil bind in the B car. There's not in the truck. There's differences, right? They're very different cars. And so, you know, once you get to that point, if you're just going out and buying a VRS setup or any setup shop, you're not really going to probably compete very well. You need to, the best drivers are also the ones typically that know how to at least adjust a car. They may not be able to build a setup from scratch, but they may say, I'm too tight. And this guy loves this setup. It's too tight for me. Well, drop the left rear spring a click or drop the cross 0.5% or mess with the ballast or braze the track bar. The guys that can speak that language are really, really good, right? Those are the guys that really excel because they can work as a team. We have like joint test sessions. We have timesheets. We have all that data, but you have to work as a driver on your driving, but you also have to either adapt your driving to the setup you're given or adapt the setup to your driving. So you have to figure out what your skill set is, what you like out of a car or a truck. I like in Michigan, I like them to do this. At IRP where they race, I like short tracks. I like where the truck rotates in the middle. Other guy might like it on entry. So every driver is different. And so if we have, let's say 4 guys go through contender again, we had different variants of setup. So in the way it works in low line was each driver had a spotter. And I think Mashburn talked about this on your podcast. You have a dedicated crew chief and a dedicated spotter, and then maybe like a analyst person that kind of watches everything. You'll get the base setup that everyone builds, and then you might go off with your crew chief and say, I need a little bit of this. I don't like this part of this setup. It's fast, it's fine, but I'm buried in traffic. It's too tight. I need this. I need that. That's where you would work with your individual crew chief to tailor it to how you want it. Probably like how it is in real life. Hendrick rolls out their base setup, but Kyle Larson likes it a little different than Chase Elliott does. And so their engineers will get together and go, okay, this is what you prefer. We're no different. So if you're a driver trying to get into that, you need to learn how to tweak the setup. You don't have to necessarily build them, but you need to be able to speak the language. And I think working with guys like Dylan and even Seth, he'll say, I need more rotation here. I need it to do this. You need to develop good feedback because the engineer, the crew chief, whoever's building the setup can only go off what you're telling them, right? So if you're saying it's too loose, well, where is it too loose? Is it too loose on entry, at apex, on exit? When you do this, when you put wheel in it, what's it doing? So you have to learn to develop that feedback in order to build a good setup, right? So you have to have all those components put together. So these guys that are fast, they're naturally fast, but they also know how to communicate, tell you what they want and what they need and don't need.
So you guys have some guys in contender coming up. How many guys do you have and who are they? Who you guys have in contender?
It's not settled yet because there's some retirements in Coke, which will actually advance more guys out of contender than 20. So it's still in flux, but we have Blaze Crawford and Brendan Kohler that made it through contender, hopefully. I know Brendan was right at like P20 and there was a tiebreaker and a drop. And then a couple guys, Logan Clampett and one of our guys, Liam Brotherton, announced they're retiring from Coke. So those are 2 spots that are now available. So there's a lot of movement, but yeah, we should have those guys. And then we'll probably have Dylan Alt and Blade Witt. And I'm sure I'm missing somebody, but Garrett Maines, I think, will be in the top 20. So the next Coke race is the last one. And after that happens, they'll solidify the contender. Okay. They send out invites. It's a whole process.
Awesome.
So we'll probably have about 4 guys in contender again that we're going to be working with to get through contender.
I want to shift gears a bit. We're kind of hit the home stretch in the podcast. And I think we'll probably get a shorter two that people may have this maybe the intro for the shorter two. So you talk about getting out of motorcycle racing. When you did that, you and I were talking a bit then, and you said you got rid of your bike and you sold all of your bike racing stuff. And when you did that, I know you took that money and you reinvested it in sim racing. So what kind of course you did. Yeah. What kind of a setup do you have now? Like, what are you rocking now? And what kind of upgrades? When I say upgrades, it's about purchased upgrades. Like, how fancy did you make your setup? What do you got? I'm sure people are dying to know.
There you go. So that's the rig as it stands today. So it's a SimLab profile rig, SimLab
Yeah,
C.
it's an 80/40, right?
Yeah, 80/40. And at the time they weren't sold in Micro Center. Now they are, but I had it shipped from the Netherlands. So I had to pay at the time, the euro was stronger than the dollar. So it cost me a little more. I've got the 49-inch ultra wide. I got a DD1. I've got that Fanatec wheel, but I also have the Gomez wheel sitting behind me actually on the webcam. I use it. I switch them back and forth. I got the Hussenfeld Ultimate Plus pedals with those are black. You can kind of see them black CNC pedal faces. I really like them better than the stock ones. I got some 3D printed parts on there. I got a cup holder because you got to put your coffee or beer or whatever your bomb.
Hey, I just got one of those myself.
Like
Hey, Scotty, that's what you need. You need a sim rig with a cup holder on it.
That's right.
Yeah, my wife's sitting there looking at it. She says, "Oh, that's nice." She asked how big your monitor was, and you said it was 49 inches.
49 ultra wide. Yeah.
That's what I bought, Scotty.
Yeah, John Vanderwall's got 3 of those.
Yeah, I got a question. Can you see your mirrors in that when you're what field of view do you use?
I'd have to look, but I mean, I can't see out the passenger window. So the only benefit I think triples would have for me is like plate reeks, especially where with my field of view, I can't see out the side. So if I hit you on the right side, it's because I just didn't see you.
Well, I think that's typical with three monitors anyway. You can see out the left pretty good. That right side,
I can see out the left.
Yeah,
okay, the right side I can't.
I'm
The
driving
right
with
side.
3 monitors now. I just went and bought me 2 cheap 32-inch TVs, and Mike didn't think my video card would push them, but it's pushing my monitor and TVs pretty well.
I'm just saying it's typical not to be able to see anything very much
I
out your
can't
right
see on the
side.
right side. I use the headphones though. I use headphones. I would recommend everyone use headphones because with the new X Audio, you can choose
hear
the
it.
options. I can tell where somebody is spatially.
Yeah.
I got 5.
You can
6
hear how
speakers.
close they
I
are to
have
you
6 speakers
on the
I can
right
hear
and left.
everybody.
Now, David, I tell you something I'm admiring here. And if anybody looks down there at your actual PC in the side plexiglass window,
That's pretty neat.
you got some nice water cooling pipes running through there, man. That looks nice.
I got bored. I mean, this is the problem when I'm bored and wasn't traveling at the time. Yeah, I
It's
did
all custom.
I did hard water pipe and the GPUs down there. It's a 3060 Ti. And then the front is the reservoir, the yellow and pink part, and then the upper 2 tubes are for the processor. So yeah, it's all water cooled. I leave it running all the time. It doesn't matter, it works fine. I was doing some Bitcoin mining when it was profitable. That actually helped me cover those pedals I bought. So
All right, so now let's talk about those upgrades. So people can see there. So instead of doing triples, you're doing the super ultra wide, which is the Samsung Odyssey, correct? That's
Yeah,
like
that's-
220,
it's not the
227
Odyssey
inch.
G9. It's just the CHG9. It's the black one, not the white one.
Okay, and now that's if anybody's wondering, it's 49 inches, but that's basically 2 27-inch monitors together. It is the same size, is what that is. Yep.
Yeah.
And so and a lot of people stop there, but you didn't. Everybody's seeing a screen up above. Why did you add that upgrade, and like how does that help you?
So yeah, in the app I have up there Stain Analyzer, which we talk about a lot. I know you've had Ricky on. It's a great app, and I've donated a couple times, I think, because it's awesome when I use it extensively. I also will run something like sim racing apps, which is free as well, which will show track map. I always hated like, where's the pace car? Like, all that kind of nonsense. So having an additional monitor up there just gives me more data, right? And I have the overlays Race Lab apps. So I have a track map there. I can have a track map on the additional screen, and then lap time or whatever I want to put up there, depending on what I'm doing. So
It also allows you to see if you're approaching a guy with a 300 iRacing to be very careful, right?
yeah. So on my main screen, I run Race Labs and I run, the standings and a relative and a track map, and I can see, it's important to have and the other big thing I think, especially when we talk about oval racing, the big thing I think is that knowing when guys are or have just pitted or on fresh tires, or so I have it where it tells me what lap someone pitted on, how long they were in the pits for. Do I know that maybe they blew their pit stop, or so I can look around and say, oh, he was in the pit 40 seconds, I was in there 41, so dang, that's how I lost gap to him. So I have all that data on the main screen, and then the additional screen above I use, like I said, for a bunch of different things depending on the mood I'm in or what I care about. Like when I'm testing, I want to look at, you see the yellow boxes on there that tells me who's fastest over a 10, 15, 20 lap average, things like that. So
if you're approaching somebody with 16 X's, you know that already. If you
no, you don't know how many X's. It doesn't
No,
report.
iRacing
man.
never tells you that.
No, because think about it, because it doesn't tell you till the race is finished, because if it did, and you knew somebody
people
was
be bump you out of your way.
Yeah, if you knew somebody ahead of you had 16 X's and
you would hit
17,
them.
it gives them a penalty, and you got 0, just hit them.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they don't report. So even your spotter doesn't know. If you go to the entries tab where it says incidents, it won't populate until the race is over. And for good reason, right? Because your spotter could say, hey, that guy ahead of you has got 16X. If you just barely bump him, he's out of here.
You don't know how many races I finished with 16 X's going, whoa.
So David, let's kind of break this down for everybody for a minute.
Yeah,
So
me too, Robert.
we talked about the screen, like the screen above.
Yep.
That's an upgrade that somebody can make. Once they get their main monitor,
Yep.
or whatever it is, the configuration they want. You did the super ultra wide route. I have triples now. Scotty has triples. Robert has triples. Once you get your main display, one upgrade path is that fourth monitor above the display, all that cool information you were just talking about. Let's look at some other upgrades as you got your screen shared and your picture up here of your setup. As I'm looking at it, let's talk about them from possible. I'll let you start from importance down. I think pedals, you've upgraded pedals and you got some real nice ones. Husenfeld Ultimates. At what level would you rank a pedal upgrade? If somebody's saying, you know what, I'm into sim racing, I've been into it for a year and a half, and I want to start to get serious and get some better equipment, how would you rank pedals in that upgrade process?
So I just got a buddy of mine into sim racing, and I gave him an extra PC that I had built for him. He bought a G29 and he was going to run on Xbox, and I said, don't do that. So I got him a PC, and within a month and a half, he's done 100 races. And I told him, and I tell anybody this, if you want the upgrade for speed, it's going to be pedals always. Pedals will always net you speed, especially on a road course, because of the braking. However, I've gained a lot of throttle control with these better pedals that you can make the throttle stiffer. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I have it in Race Labs, and I showed you this, Mike, where you have the graph of the throttle and brake inputs and the percentage number. I can hold my throttle at 80% and never vacillate off of 80. I know exactly that I'm at 80% because the pedals have enough resistance, and these have a spring, and also, or it has the rubbers, and then it has a hydraulic damper. But I have them where they're not the softest setting, but not the hardest setting. But I can keep my throttle at such a consistent level that when you're going in a corner and you need maintenance throttle, meaning you should never be all the way off of the gas, right? Never. You might lift on a corner and float in, but on a road course, you might need what's called maintenance throttle, where you want to maintain 20%, 25%, 30%. You need pedals that are consistent, that you're not just barely touching them and they go to the floor. And then the brake, as we know in road racing, is my buddy got a new set of pedals. He got some used CSL Elites from G29, and he knocked seconds off his personal best the first day he had them because of the load cell and the feel. And then I upgraded the pedal faces, and I've tried to get a lot better at road racing. And, I did pretty well at the Roval and had some good, few wins at Watkins Glen, and I'm by no means amazing, but the pedals, if you want the best bang for your buck to make you fast, even in oval racing, pedals are number one. I know. So one of our pro drivers, Dylan Alt, still drives on a G29, and he's a Coke driver. The wheel will not make you faster. The pedals absolutely will make you faster.
So the wheel won't make you faster, but a lot of people like to upgrade their wheel. I personally, I think you and I have the exact same wheelbase. I got a DD1. Is yours the DD1 or the DD2?
DD1.
DD1. And for me, I think that's the most I'll ever need. I don't plan on ever upgrading unless it breaks. And there used to be some issues with the magnet oscillation, or what they call
notchiness.
It was notchiness, and there's an actual technical word for it, magnet curving or oscillation, whatever. But it was caused by anyway, they fixed it through software, and they rewrote their drivers here a while back, and you sent me the link to that. And ever since then, I haven't felt any of that. So, to me, I think that is a perfect base for me. I don't need to spend more money on a SimuCube or anything like that. I don't think it's going to make me any faster.
It won't.
And so if somebody's asking, A lot of people want though, they'll say, well, I got my G29, but I like to get something a little stronger, a little better to help me feel some things. If that's the case, let me get your opinion. Let everybody else hear. What do you think a good place to be? Like, you don't have to go to a DD1 or something that strong, and you could if you wanted to. But what do you think is a good solid place to be? What offerings out
it
there?
depends on what ecosystem you want to be in. Like Christopher upgraded from a CSL Elite to the CSL DD, which is an 8 Newton meter direct drive. If you want to be, if you're in the Fanatec ecosystem, you have a wheel, it'll work on the base. Then the Fanatec stuff's fine. Some people say their support's horrible. I knock on wood, I haven't had any issues on my stuff. It works, it's fine, whatever. If you want, like I have the Gomez wheel sitting behind me. If you don't care about the Fanatec ecosystem, there's so many players out there now. I think I've heard good things about the SimMagic ones are really good. There are lower end Simucubes, but those are
that new company Moses got like a
got a bunch, but
they got a 9 Newton meter out now and a 5 or 6
Fanatec though, where you want their wheels with their base because you can tune settings. So I would just say it depends what ecosystem you're in, but the days of gear and belt driven wheels are over.
You're saying direct drive. If you're going to get serious and make any kind of an upgrade, you're saying direct drive or bust.
The difference for me is the way I explain it to people. It's like when we went from SD TV, standard television to HD TV, the content is the same, but the clarity and the definition are better. So
how strong though? How strong do you think is enough?
I don't turn mine all 8. I've used Christopher's. I think 8's pretty good if you're oval racing. Now, if you're road racing and you're driving different cars, and I've never cranked my wheel up to like 100. It's a 20 Newton meter wheel. I mean, I have, and it's like undrivable, but I run mine at like 60%. So that's 10,
that's exactly what I run mine at, is 12 Newton meters is what 60%.
And so on ovals, what I like and what I've got the settings to is when you're cranked into a turn, you can feel through the wheel, the ass end coming around, or the wheel getting light, or pulling on you, knowing that you've pitched the car and yaw too much. So there is a benefit to having the strength turned up. There are guys, Cornell is one of them, that back when the G29s were, what people had, they were doing 0 force feedback because the wheel wouldn't be jerked out of their hands. You're thinking of Charlotte, the oval, you're going around in the bump and it pulls the wheel, and then your car goes up the track because you're iron gripping the wheel and you're putting all that. And that's the thing I learned on the bike. Hold the bars of the wheel like you're holding a chicken. You don't want it to escape, but you don't want to kill it, right? So when you're holding the neck of a chicken, you gotta have your hands on it, but you don't want it too much. And that's the thing I try to, because if you hold onto the wheel too much, and you see this a lot at plate tracks, the guys that are weaving down the straightaways, they're probably death gripping their wheel, and when the wheel moves, it's forcing feedback into their arms, and then it's a loop that they feed back into the wheel. So for me, it's like reminding myself not to grip the wheel too hard, but to have enough force feedback that it's giving you cues to what the car is doing and what you should be doing in reaction to that. So I think that, the CSL DDs, I think if you're like an entry level and you bought good pedals, then I would say that's probably the next upgrade.
So I used to be a chicken catcher, and we caught the chickens by their feet.
But you held them enough to make sure they didn't fly away, though, right?
Oh yeah. Well, if they went out and pecked on your hand, they got a good thump on the head a couple of times, and you.
So David, I didn't see a shifter there. Are you just using paddle shifters?
I have the shifter down here, but I'm not using it right now. I've kind of gone back and forth with it. I'm using paddles on the wheels. I just like them better.
Is that fan there for your coolest, or let you?
Well, we're going to get into that here in a second, Robert. Let's not jump the gun on the fan.
Excuse me.
Yeah, settle down.
Yeah, simmer on down now. So
no way.
Go back, David. Go back to the main picture here. Real quick.
All right, hold on.
Because I think the main thing that's left for me is
a coffee holder.
Once you get pedals, which and I agree with you. Me and Tracy have talked about this before, that pedals is like number one if you want to get faster. And then a lot of people want to upgrade their wheelbase because of immersion. And then obviously you want to have a comfortable seat for your butt to sit in, especially if you're racing an hour-long race. You don't want your butt to get sore.
Yeah.
So there you go. So you covered those bases.
The seat's important when you start going to these better load cell pedals, because when you, especially in road racing, when you push on that pedal, you feel it in your lower back. You need that seat to be solid, right? Because
Yes.
if it moves or wiggles, you're in an office chair, you shove the brake and it rolls you backward, you're not going to be as accurate with your, think about it in a car, your seat, if your seat moved in your car, it's undrivable. You'd be all over the place.
Soft cushion for your butt, firm back.
That's right. So that you can see that chair's, I mean, that cushion on the bottom is not very thick, but it's good enough. My cat's in there now. She loves sleeping in that seat. So
after you got that, I'll tell you one thing I'm so glad that I got. And this is the last thing I'll talk about when it comes to like purchasing of equipment is your aluminum profile rig. I've got one as well. I got mine from GT Omega. You got yours from SimLab, right? Yep. And I love it. I was debating if I wanted to spend that much money. Mine cost me like, I think it was like $7 something. It came with the seat, like almost $800 with the seat. I had a package deal with GT Omega when I got mine. And I was wanting to upgrade because I had a real cheap one starting to fall apart. And I had one eyeballed, and it was one of those 2.5-inch round tubing rigs, which are okay. But the one I wanted was sold out. And I was like, well, I could go up and get the aluminum profile. They've got that in stock. And I started kicking it around. And my wife, of all people, said, well, if you get the nice one, are you ever going to need another one again? And I said, no. She's just get that.
That's what my wife says too.
Yeah,
because I've upgraded wheels like
the
4
extra $200.
She's like, you should have just bought the best one the first time and be done with it.
That's how my wife thinks. Where I usually do things incrementally because I'm tight, with money.
Yeah.
My wife's like, no, why would you buy something twice? If this is the last one you'd ever need, just buy it. And so I bought it, and Tracy highly recommended an aluminum profile rig to me because he had one. I was like, okay. And I bought it, man, David, it was the best. It was one of the best things I ever bought as far as like expandability. I love it. And it's solid.
They're like Legos. I mean, you can add everything to these things. There's accessories from all these different manufacturers that you can buy that work on all of them because they all use the same T-nut system. So I could buy a Next Level Racing, keyboard tray and put it on my SimLab. I could buy something from anyone that makes anything compatible. It's like Legos, and you could just build it.
They mix and match. Yeah. Like he could have his SimLab 80/20 rig, and you could buy the GT Omega monitor mount, right? It's all mix and match. And you can add so much stuff to it. As everybody looks at yours, and we'll get into everything else here other than the main upgrades we just talked about. We'll get into everything else here in just a second, kind of a separate little piece or segment. But I just want to say, look at all that he's got on it. Mine's starting to look like that, right? And the only way that's possible is through one of those 80/40 rigs. And so I would say this, once you have gotten into, if you wanted to start in sim racing, I'd grab like a $100, wheel stand or something to put on your desk just to see if you like it.
That's
and
what
once you start, with. And once, and me too. And once you start to upgrade equipment, and you start to get a nice pedal to put on that wheel stand and to get a nice wheel, and you're like, hey, you know what? This is something I'm going to be in long term. I think you should immediately start looking at the 80/20 rig, get it set up, and just say, that's my rig. And I don't think you'll ever need to upgrade that. You'll be able to upgrade the things on it, but you'll never need another rig.
No, they came out with a new version that adds like a floor, but it's all going to be upgradable from this one. So it's like,
correct.
I built Christopher's out of wood though. So, this stuff's a lot of money. I don't, Chris has asked me, well, how much do you have invested? Someone asked me, I said, I don't keep, just like with my track bikes, I don't keep track because it's too depressing. I don't add up how much I have in here.
Well, and you do it over time though. It's not like you just went out one day and blew all that money at once. It was all over time.
I think the barrier to entry can be intimidating, right, in this hobby. And I think you don't have to go this route. I would say if how many hour long, B opens are minimum hour long. How many hours a week am I spending in here? A lot. So for me, it's the return on investment is worth it. I would say if you're getting into it, to your point, get a wheel stand, or there's plans online. I found some online. I built an entire rig for Chris out of 2x4s that I had extra. I went to a pick and pull and pulled a seat out of a Mazda 3 for $30, and I mounted it.
I did the same thing. I took a GT Omega classic wheel stand, bought the rear seat frame, and went into a junkyard and got a leather seat out of a Subaru and slapped on it for my first full rig.
Yeah, so you don't have to go nuts. There's lots of good Facebook groups about like DIY, like sim rigs, and there's really creative people that build them out of wood, out of PVC. It just depends what you're doing. So I don't not everyone has when I sold my bikes, I got like $5 or $6 grand. And I'm like, okay, here I go, because I got, I sold my bikes and now I can do this. Not everyone gets into it. So I do think, if you're building, if you want to be good at sim racing, the first thing is get pedals. Make sure you can mount the pedals securely. So that may be a wheel stand, it may be a wooden rig, whatever the heck it is. I think Ty Severa, he has a wood rig him and his dad built, and it is awesome. So by no means do you have to, but I do think, to your point, these are kind of like Legos, and they're very extensible. You can do a lot with them, and I think they're good value if you want to drop. I mean, I think my seat alone was $500, and the rig was like 12. So it's not cheap.
I went with GT Omega because they sold the cheapest 80/40 bundle you could find, and I got the seat with it. I think
they sell that stuff at Micro Center. So there's Tony Kanaan branded 80/20 rigs at Micro Center. They sell Simucube. They sell the Gomez wheel. They sell the Hussenfeld pedals I bought were at my freaking Micro Center in Dallas. So sim racing to me is at the best point it's ever been at, because you have so many players now in the industry making, I would say affordable, but that's relative, really good products though. And ultimately the more competition is only going to drive the price down for consumers. So there's a lot of options out there.
Well, I tell you what, David, last topic for the podcast tonight. And that is, you and I you talk about people have differences in the world. People have different beliefs, in religion and politics and all this stuff, but we all like sim racing. Like we all can communicate and have a good time talking about racing and sim racing and the community and stuff. Well, you and I share something else, and thing that we probably have spent the most time chit chatting about and sending each other messages back and forth is our IT background, our love of tech and that kind of stuff. And we've kind of gotten into more of that too, as I look at your picture here, is like, I'm looking at those lights up there. I'm looking at your cup holder. I'm looking at some of this stuff that you've got on this rig. And some of it, it's obviously 3D printed.
Yep.
And I order a lot of 3D printed stuff. You've got a 3D printer. You sent me a recommendation. So once you've got one of these aluminum profile rigs, you can just download plans and print stuff off. So why don't you walk us through some of the cool upgrades you've got and 3D printed things you have on there, and some of the DIY projects. If you're into DIY, do it yourself sim racing stuff, there's software like SimHub and different things you get controllers for, and you can do a lot of these cool things. So why don't you talk to us and tell us about some of the cool 3D printed projects you've already done, some things you could do possibly, and just kind of break the audience into the world of do it yourself 3D sim racing projects.
Yeah, sure. So on the previous picture, those lights above are the Philips Hue lights, which I sync with the screen colors. So like at Las Vegas, I just printed those. They used to be mounted behind the monitor facing the wall and kind of added an ambient light. But I found these, someone had just made these, and I put them on top of the rig. And what it does is when you're driving like in Vegas this weekend, there's those light shadows from the track lighting, right? There's the big poles. Those lights will flicker as you drive under them. And if you go next to a wall that has red paint, it'll have a red light. If you're on a road course and go under a tree, it'll be a shadow or a green light. So again, it doesn't make you faster. It's more an immersion thing. So I did that. And then on the picture I'm sharing now.
So on those lights, you purchased lights and wired them up to your computer, but the mounts that they're mounted to, you 3D printed those yourself, right? Like you downloaded a schematic off like Thingiverse or something.
Yep.
And you have a 3D printer in your house, and you literally made those mounts yourself.
Correct. Yeah. So the mounts, if I go, I don't know if I can zoom in up here, but you can kind of see them. The Hue lights are just the black bars, and then the round part and the sticks or whatever you call them, that's all 3D printed. And then I used some black, nuts and washer and bolts that I had and bolted it together. So that's all 3D printed. So it cost me nothing other than maybe $1 or $2 in filament. And, it took about probably 6 or 7 hours to print, all that stuff. But so I was, I have the printer, you can kind of see the orange in my back here. That's where my 3D printer is. So I just have it going, when I'm working on, I may, throw a print on there, I'll babysit it. And then, a couple hours later, I've got a print and I can mount it up and do what I need to do. So so that's the lights. And then the other picture I have, let me share this. This is the other one. So I took a PC fan and I actually have this temporary because I just put it back up. I had it for a while and then I got rid of
So
it.
that's like what? That's like what, a standard 120 millimeter PC fan there.
But it's like 7,000 RPM.
Oh my
a-
goodness, that's like a little jet
Oh.
motor.
It's a big boy, yeah. So I 3D printed the entire part you see here. So this part with the blades and looks like a like a jet engine. All that's 3D printed. You can tell by the rings right here. And then I have it wired into Sim Hub. So what it does is you can buy these. They're called wind simulators. So as you go faster in the car, the wind will pick up more RPM. And in my office, when I close the doors, it gets really warm in here. So I have like a little desk fan, and then I have that where I can, this whole arm right here is part of the 80/20 system, and I can move that arm forward and back and adjust it. And then I used a GoPro mount for the fan itself, where I can remove it, and I use that heavy duty Velcro, and I can add and remove and move it. And then I have a Stream Deck in a 3D printed box that has room for buttons if I wanted to add like a brake bias knob or something I can put in there. But right now it's just got my Stream Deck, and I use that for, as you can see there on the screen, when you're in the sim and you want to hit the tab key for your lap time, I have it as a button. I have no tires, 2 tires, 4 tires, fuel, no fuel, some of the hotkeys for Discord and fitting in and all that kind of stuff. It's just right there on my button box. And the other button boxes you can buy with the traditional buttons are fine. But what I like about this is that I can hit that up arrow in the upper left corner, go back to the main menu, and I can launch Sim Hub, my pedal software, Race Lab. So in the middle of a race, I've had Sim Hub die. Well, all I have to do is go back to that, hit the button, and it relaunches, right? So it's really nested menus are pretty neat. So you can go back and forth. And then on this little box next to it is what's called an iFlag. And there's guys that sell these now, but that is a 3D printed case with an Arduino Uno or Leonardo. I can't remember which model, but it's an Arduino. And then the LED board is an additional like daughter board that you stick on top of it. And then there's a USB cable. And then there's a piece of software that in the iRacing forums, I was helping the guy beta test, and he rewrote it. He'll sell you the light for $100, made the lights and everything. I bought the Arduino. I was at Micro Center. The Arduino itself is $10. I think the LED board's $15. And then I 3D printed the filament. So for $20, I now have a light system. So if the caution comes out or the pace car's out, or in road racing, you get the blue flag, all that stuff will blink right there next to me. So it's in my peripheral vision, so I can just see it. I don't have to think, I just know what's going on. So it's handy for yellow flags and white flag. How many times, a couple times in the early days, I'll forget what, I'm on the last lap or I'm not on the last lap. Well, that thing will stay white the whole lap, knowing that you're on the last lap. So again, these are little things that we talked earlier about, the little things of the sport and the hobby that add up to big things, right? You make a mistake, you speed, you forget it's the last lap, whatever it is. These are just kind of immersion things. They don't make you faster, but I like to think they make my life easier while I'm racing, especially like the button box. I use that every race. So for me, yeah, Stream Deck's $150, but I use it every single race. So for me, it's a worthwhile investment.
So
But your lava lamp isn't working though.
Which lava lamp?
The one behind you, the orange, hasn't moved at all.
I turned it on earlier. It's getting there.
Oh, I just see the bubbly go around.
It's getting there. It's getting there.
Okay.
So David,
Takes a while.
Well, that's
Is it-
1970 technology there, right?
Dude, I love lava lamps. My mom bought that for me. I love it.
so David, is there any other 3D printed stuff you got on here? Is that all of it?
Just I have the cup holder, which was in the previous picture. I think that's about it for now. I think that's all the 3D printed stuff. And I've been into 3D printing for about 5 years. So I have 2 3D printers. One I kind of built up, I bought, and then I have a really good one called a Prusa, which is the orange thing behind me. It can actually print multiple filaments. So I was asking you about I think the
Button box for the Stream Deck button box that I have. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I show
Here, let me share my screen here real quick.
there.
So here's a
there you go.
screenshot of a cup holder right here that I've got up.
That looks like mine. Yeah, it's all the same stuff. I mean,
Yeah, it's all the same stuff. And so there's a picture of my cup holder. And see, I think this is cool. Like, you sent me a link to a good 3D printer. I'm thinking about getting one because like I've ordered I've ordered probably a couple $100 in 3D printed stuff this year. I do 3D printed stuff, but I'll download it off. I'll either go to somebody selling it like on Etsy or selling it somewhere, or if it's something I can't find somebody selling, I'll go to Thingiverse like you do, and I'll download the file, and then I'll go to a website of a company that will 3D print it and ship it to you.
Yeah.
And so I've done so much of that stuff. I think I'd be better off at this point just buying myself a 3D printer, because I could went on Thingiverse, downloaded this cup holder and had it printed in a matter of a few hours, like you're talking about, versus paying I think I paid $12 or something for that thing.
So I 3D printed this. It holds all my thumb drives, right? So
yeah. Hold on, wait a minute. Nobody can see that. Let me stop my screen share.
There you go. Right. So that's all 3D printed. So there's so many little things that I'll print. I actually designed when I was working on the track bike, I removed a bunch of, it's all about removing weight when you're racing or anything. So I removed the whole surround around the display, but I still needed to mount the dashboard. So I actually designed and 3D printed a plate that took its place, and I printed it with ABS, which is really strong, holds up to heat and vibration and things like that. And, so I've used a 3D printer in that way. And so you have there, it looks like they use, I can tell by the filament, the black with the speckles, probably the same printer I have. They use it's called Prusa Mint. It's a black filament with some speckles, and then they have multiple colors. And so my printer will do that. It's kind of a big pain in the ass. I'll show you here in a second. Here, let me.
Yeah, so you see some super glue in white there, right? That's super glue because when I had to drill out the holes just weren't quite big enough for the bolts to go through. Like you had to screw the bolts through and almost threaded the plastic, and it was hard to get in there. So I took my drill and kind of just reamed it out a little bit. When I did it cracked, it like split it a little bit. So I had to super glue it back together. And so you can see a little bit of white super glue there. But no, I have the Stream Deck like you do, and this is a folder that has all my streaming stuff where I live stream my races. But again, you can hit the up arrow and all those pit boxes like change all 4 tires. I have that similar setup on mine. But that's a really cool upgrade. But again, I'm going back to the 3D printing. This is a 3D printed holder for it, just like kind of like what you had. I had the cup holder, and then the last one I want to show is if you guys are looking for a solid shifter and don't want to spend a whole lot of money, this is a proof they sent me of the shell of the shifter I ordered from SHH Shifters, that they're made in Spain. And they even printed our alien head logo on it for me. And they 3D print the shell of all the shifters they make. So, I mean, 3D printing is awesome. And there's a lot of sim racing applications for it. So if you guys have been thinking about getting a 3D printer, or you saw a lot of the stuff me and David's been showing you, and you're like, hey, that's really cool for sim racing, man, 3D printers are really affordable anymore, David, aren't they? I mean, you sent me a link for one for like $330.
Yeah. So I'll share this real quick, and I'll kind of show you what I have and then what I would tell someone getting into 3D printing, depending on their level of comfort. So this is a Prusa. They're kind of the gold standard as far as open source printing. The guy who created it, Joseph Prusa, basically open sourced his design. And so a lot of these printers you see that have the 2 rails, and then the Z axis and then the Y axis, he basically created this and open sourced it. But you can buy his printer if you want one. It's going to cost like $600-700. However, if you want something that just works out of the box that you don't have to tinker with, this is it. So my wife bought this for me a couple of years ago for my birthday. I had another printer that I kind of built up. It was started off as a piece of crap, and I upgraded the frame to kind of like an 80/20 frame actually. But if you have the budget and it's something you want to get serious about, and then I have what's called the multi-material. So you see this little orange thing up here. I can actually print with these with up to 5 different filaments on a single job. So like the print you had where it had the black and then the red and then the white.
Yeah.
I could print something with multiple colors or types of filament on the same job. So what it'll do is it'll get to a point where it needs to switch, that this mechanism will switch. It'll grab the other filament it needs and it will feed it through automatically. Kinda. It you have to really babysit it. It doesn't work that easy, but for the most part, I do a lot of single color or single filament prints. So there are different types of filament. You would want something more rigid, like probably you had with that splitting. If they were to probably have printed it with what's called infill, basically more filling in the middle, it probably would have been sturdier. They could have used a different filament type, which can withhold heat and things, but you can there's a whole world of 3D printing. But if you want something and you have the money and you just want it to work and you don't want to, so the thing with 3D printing, it's much like sim racing. You get into it and then you're 3D printing parts to upgrade your 3D printer. So like all the orange is all 3D printed. Like they print half the parts that the printer is made of, right? So you can find all these add-ons and things, and a really popular printer. I can show you on. Let me share this.
Yeah, you sent me one. It was like $329 or something the other day.
Yeah, so
yeah, that was it. Yeah,
the
Ender, that was the one you sent me.
So the Ender stuff from Creality is pretty good. The one thing I would tell you is you're going to want what's called a bed leveler. Not to get too nerdy, but basically the nozzle has to be a certain distance from the bed, or the material won't stick. So if it's too close, it doesn't come out, or it mooshes it all over and it's not usable, or it's too high and it just looks like it's, like a soft serve machine, right? It's just coming out and coming out and coming out. So the biggest challenge you have with 3D printing is the first layer of printing. So if you get a what's called an automatic bed leveler, what it does is when every print job, it'll go probe all these points on the bed. If you look at this little diagram here, see all those that grid and those dots? What it does is it goes around and it goes, nothing is perfectly flat. The bed, it cannot be perfectly flat. So what it does is it says, when I measure this coordinate, it's 0.02 millimeter different than the center of the bed. So what the software will do in a printer is compensate for the unevenness of the bed. So what happens is if you don't print a good first layer on your print, the print's garbage, right? It's got to be a good first layer. It's got to adhere. It's got to stick because the bed's heated. So the material has to stick to the bed or it just rips itself apart and then you've got a big mess. So the bare minimum for me, if you're going to buy a 3D printer, is you want to have it where it has an automatic bed leveler, which is a little probe that goes out the side and it literally goes to each coordinate, drops a probe, it measures the distance, and then it goes to the next one. So the Ender 3s are good. And the good thing about them is that they have a ton of community support. So there's big subreddits, there's Facebook groups, there's Thingiverse where you can print off upgrades and parts and get advice. So they have a huge ecosystem. So you can get into it for like, this one's like $220. You can get in that. To me, that's like the basement where I would get in, is make sure it has a bed leveler is the big thing. And then you'll probably want to buy a Raspberry Pi. So you have to plug a computer in to send it a print job. Well, if you have a Raspberry Pi, you can use something called Octoprint, which basically provides you a web interface. So you can upload the file through a web browser. And it also has mine has a webcam so I can watch it. So I can just upload the file and say print, and then it's a print server essentially. And it just handles all of the communication. So you don't have to take a PC, plug it in, the whole thing. You just get a $30 Raspberry Pi and you call it a day. So that's the one I would recommend. And again, this is the one I have. My main one, if you want something that is just going to work out of the box, like you literally you can buy it built, or you can build it yourself. Building yourself takes about a half a day to do it. Comes in all the parts, but really good directions. If you're hands-on, you want to do that. But you want something that's just going to work straight out of the box, then this is the one I would recommend. If you want a really, really good that prints multiple filaments, you can print with what's called TPU. The soft phone cases.
Yes.
You can print with that, but you need a specific type of hot end, and you can't necessarily do that with the Ender. You might be able to, but it's going to depend on what you need. And there's a lot of research you can do. There's tons of resources, but that's the easy thing. And then there's Facebook groups. There's like a 3D printed sim racing group. All they specialize on is guys will design like those light mounts I put on. All that stuff is people will design and just give away, or some people will design it and sell it to you. So there's multiple methods, but I've been doing 3D printing for about 6 years and it's awesome.
Yeah. And so I've gotten into 3D printed stuff, not because I own one, is because I got into it through Thingiverse, and people don't know what that is. They want you to go up to Thingiverse, take us to Thingiverse. You can go on like Etsy, you can go on eBay, you can go in places and you can buy pre-printed 3D printed stuff. That's how I got the cup holder for my rig. That's how I got that button box mount and holder all that I have for my rig, right? And so I've been into 3D printed stuff, even though I don't own a 3D printer, for a good while now, a couple of years or so. I got a 3D printed face gasket for my VR headset, the HP Reverb G2, that got my eyes closer to the screens and give me a bigger field of view. I've been in the 3D print stuff for a long time, and what I've done is either I bought it pre-made where they sell it on Etsy pre-made or whatever, eBay or wherever. But I've also, you can go to Thingiverse, and that's where David's at now. You can download the same file that David downloads, and he prints it on his home 3D printer. But there's also companies out there that have websites that you can upload that 3D printed file to their website. They will print it for you and charge you $20, $30, whatever, and then mail it to your house. That takes a couple of weeks turnaround time. I've done that on a couple of items before where I couldn't find it already made, somebody selling it. So I just went to a company that 3D prints and mails it. They 3D printed it, mailed it to me, and I used it. So Thingiverse is a good tool. That's kind of the build up to it. David, why don't you show people what you're showing here?
Yeah, so I just searched Fanatec and I actually found this, which I actually printed. I built my own dash with a USB-D 480, and he had these LEDs, and I bought some LEDs that had a different spacing. So if you look down here, I actually contributed what's called a remix. So what's cool about Thingiverse and all of these is you can see here there's remixes. So someone creates something with 3D design software and you say, man, that's great, but I want it to be a little different. Well, you can publish what's called a remix. So like I remixed this to fit a different LED brand, right? So he bought one brand and they were, 1 millimeter apart. Mine was 0.7 or whatever it was, and they weren't lining up. So I, used to do some AutoCAD and some things like that. So I went through and just redesigned it, and then I submitted it to him so then everybody else can use it, right? So there's the sky's the limit. Guys like the Gomez wheel I bought, he started off 3D printing his wheels, and when you go to a shop in Dallas, he has an Ender 3. He uses Fusion 360 to design his wheels. So all this kind of rapid prototyping, but for us, our rigs aren't real cars. So if it's made out of plastic, it doesn't have to be metal. It doesn't have to be ultra durable. So there's guys on here that take like a Logitech G29 wheel, and this guy made it an F1 wheel. So he took and printed a template that you can basically print, and you can walk through and see the design. You can see the different parts you have to print. So there's the grip, that's the other grip. And then you've got, maybe the base or whatever it has to go on. So these are all the individual parts that you'll have to print. And then he did, there's instructions, right? So tells you what settings to use. Here he used an Ender 3 Pro. He used, these are specific 3D printing related settings, but then basically says, this is how I built it. And then you can see there's three remixes. So someone took it and made a variant of it, and they published it for everyone to use. So it's an amazing resource because there's so many creative, smart people that say, hey, this is a neat idea, but I need it tweaked or I want it different. The sky's the limit, right? Like
this is all free. It's all free, open to the public. And if you look right up there on the upper right, it says download files. You literally just each one of these pieces is a separate file. It's just like any other file on your computer. And you just simply can upload that to a site that will print it for you and mail it to you. Or if you buy a 3D printer, you can just print that file. Yeah, and it's got all the design in there, tells the 3D printer everything to do to make that object. And you can download those files right here of the things that are shown in the picture and all the stuff he's showing you. So that's awesome.
Yeah, like I said, I just searched for Fanatec and it came up with all this stuff, right? So the sky's the limit, man. I mean, you can, look at all this stuff. I mean, people made, stands for their wheels, or I did the rumble pedal thing, right? I took some Xbox 360 rumble motors and I 3D printed these and I hooked it up to an Arduino. And
I remember when you guys did that, you hooked them up to your Chris's CSL Elite pedals, didn't you?
Yep. So we did this, and there's a guy that sells these kits for 100 and whatever bucks. Well, here's a video on, here's the Arduino I have that runs in my fan. Well, here's the same thing. I ripped apart an Xbox controller, took out the rumble motors, 3D printed the bracket, wired it up, and now I've got a rumble motor kit for $20 or whatever, right? $20 for the board. I had old Xbox controllers I wasn't using, ripped the motors out. Now I got a rumble kit. So, it depends on how hands-on you want to be, but there's tons of stuff out there, man. It's an exciting time. I wish this stuff was when I was younger. It waited until I'm in my mid 40s, but this stuff's awesome. I mean, I've seen these, right? So here you mentioned 80/40 rig. Someone built a holder to hold their Fanatec wheels on their rig. So you see people that have their wheels, their extra wheels on their rig. Well, here's a mount, and the filament cost, like the whole spool you saw, $20 for a roll of filament. I could print easily 100 of these with one roll of filament for $20.
For $20, right? That's why I'm thinking about buying one here soon, is because I order so many 3D printed items, and I've got so much in them that like I could order that printer within a year. A couple rolls of filament and the printer cost in a year, I'd probably have broke even on what I would have ordered anyway.
Yeah, so he's using an Ender. Again, these are really popular printers, or it's a different Creality printer, but yeah, he printed that, and there it is on his rig. Yeah, you could print this, and probably this print would probably take you 2 hours. It'd literally cost you like $4 in filament, if that, and you're done. And if you break it or you drill a hole through it and you mess it up, you print another one. It's awesome. It's a really neat hobby for sure. Trying to see if there's anything else cool here. Some people have had their own magnetic shifters, and here's a Fanatec CSL button box. So kind of what you have with your Stream Deck.
The buttons.
Yeah, here's one you can do with buttons. And so again, it's sky's the limit. And if you have any familiarity with any type of 3D software, you can create your own model and then export it and print it, right? So again, sky's the limit for people that are technically minded and want to get into that.
And there's a whole subculture of DIY sim racing builders there's a Facebook group out there. It's called DIY Sim Racer. I'm a member of, and there's like 65,000 members of this Facebook group, and they all do this kind of stuff. A lot of guys do it with wood, other guys 3D print stuff, and it's a whole community supporting this whole DIY thing of printing and building your own sim racing equipment.
Yeah, these are really popular right now. So like the Vocor is a display type. They're really affordable. They're actually what Gomez uses in his wheel. So the wheel I have with the display in it, it's this display, which SimHub will use for dashboards. So you could buy the display, plug it into a USB port, 3D print your case, mount it on your wheel, and you're done for probably less than $100, where you could go buy one that's made for about $300. So it just depends. If you don't mind tinkering and some DIY, then yeah, this is the way forward. It's going to save you a lot of money. And with my bikes, I have as much fun tinkering and upgrading with the rig as I do actually using it, right? So for me, it's kind of it's a bonus. I get to have fun playing with it, putting it together, using it, and then I can brag about it to when strangers come by and go, "What is that contraption?" And you're like, "Oh, it's all this." So yeah, stuff, man. And if you I'm in your Discord. If you want to create a 3D printing channel, and if anyone has questions, advice, what to buy, where to start, it's a big world and there's a lot out there. But more than happy to post some of this stuff up for people that are interested.
Awesome, thank you, David. I appreciate it. Let's get back everybody's faces here for a second as we finish up the broadcast. Guys, we appreciate David being here with us, man. This was an amazing podcast, everywhere from your personal experiences and racing and getting started, the bike racing, like all that stuff. And the fact that the 3D printing is something cool, and the DIY stuff that we've never had a guest yet that's really been into that's been able to talk about it like you have. So I really appreciate you coming on and covering all this tonight. It's been a great podcast. Tracy, Scotty, Robert, you guys got anything else that you want to talk about with David before we let him go tonight?
Well, one thing.
Go ahead, Robert.
I was going to say one thing. Well, seeing David's face and stuff and talking to him, I might not hit him as hard when I wreck him or something, or try to stay away or whatever. Now,
aggressive, I'm competitive, I want to win. The thing about me is I'll talk a lot of stuff. I'll say it. Christopher, when he was in the other room, I'd yell at him for running into me. And the thing is, I think
I heard you do that before. I remember we were all in Discord and I heard you yelling at him from the other room.
The thing is, we're all really competitive people. And I think the thing that can sometimes, especially for me, and you can tell when I talk about things I like, I'm really passionate. It's why I do what I do for a living. I got to do a 4-hour presentation in front of customers on Wednesday. This is what I do. I am passionate. I get into it. And so sometimes, and it sucks because on the radio, it's kind of like through text message, you don't get the context or the tone. I mean, you do through voice chat, but just because I say, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" doesn't mean I hate you. It means what the hell are you doing?
Yes, it does. You hate them.
It's like everybody when they get in a wreck, they're mad at that moment. But you give them a few minutes, everything's good, and the next race is a different.
Yeah, story. And then hey, you can message me later and say, "Hey, what was that thing you were talking about? Like, help me with my wheel settings." And Mike will tell you, I'll help anybody. I don't care. I mean, anybody wants to know anything, I'll. Other than giving you setups, which I'm not going to give you, but if you have questions about the rig or what I'm doing, or I don't care, man. I want more people to do this, right? Because I think it's more fun with more people
I agree. I agree.
that are passionate about it. I want more of us in this community to have a good time. And yeah, we butt heads, and yeah, we talk shit, and yeah, we get mad, but that's part of it.
So, hey, Scotty, maybe David can get you to set up to just print yourself a triple monitor mount there you're needing.
There you go.
Scotty says he's in need of a triple monitor mount now.
That's not something you want to print, man. That's something you want metal for that.
I know. I'm just teasing
I'll
Scotty.
just buy one if I decide to get one. I don't know.
There's some good ones. There's some good ones for not a lot of money.
No, I'm just teasing Scotty because he had a monitor mishap and got knocked over and like out of alignment.
happens.
Mike,
But anyway.
Mike keeps telling me how much I need to upgrade this and buy this, and he sent me all these different places where I need to go buy this and buy this and buy that, and I would love to be able to buy that, but right now I'm kind of strapped financially wise. So maybe in a year after I pay off some of this debt that I've incurred.
Build one out of wood, dude. I've seen people do it. 2x4s. 2x4s.
Well, I thought about that too, and have considered that. I even been thinking about checking out some seats at the junkyards here in town.
That's what I was like, of course I did it when I was like 105, and it was the furthest back in the damn lot. And I had to go take that seat out for Christopher, and he wasn't with me. And I went down there at the pick and pull, it cost me $30, and I'm dragging it through the gravel parking lot. It has all the airbags and stuff in it, but it was $30. So you don't.
Pick and pull, where's it at? Is that in Texas?
Well, there's pick and pulls everywhere.
Yeah, no, there ain't pick and pulls around here. They're starting to get one though. There's somebody opening up.
There's junkyards, and then there's pick and pull where you literally pay like a flat rate. You'll pull whatever you carry.
They don't have those here. They had them in Louisiana. I went to Pipes You Pull It in Louisiana all the time to get parts.
I think Scotty needs a cat for his coffee.
There you go.
I'm in a little town up in Missouri. It's our whole county's only got 42,000 people in it.
So hey Trace, so are you sold? Are you ready to go buy yourself a 3D printer and start printing you up like ambient lighting and all this stuff?
Yeah, I wanna break into the LED lighting. That's the one thing I seen you were lacking. So I think I'm gonna get a head start on that.
He's got that eye flag thing on there.
Everybody needs a little mood lighting. I've been thinking about the LED.
I've got a light strip under the rig too that syncs with the Hue software that runs off the monitor. So like if you're looking at the room, it's like ambient lighting in here. It's mood lighting for me. It's fun.
So does that come on yellow when your caution light comes
No,
on?
it's not synced to the flags. I have the eye flag. So it's more around it syncs to the video on the screen. So like when I'm on my desktop and it's blue, the lights will actually be blue. But when you're in sim, if you're running at Darlington and the walls go red and white, the lights will flicker red and white as you drive by the wall. So it adds, and there's a couple of videos by Will Ford boosted.
You won't get a seizure. You won't get a seizure for seeing that boom flashing like that.
I don't get a seizure, but I can't guarantee everybody will be safe.
I remember Darlington. I think it was red and white, and having that going across the wall there, and it's flickering in the corner of your eye. I said, "Boy, I could get a seizure doing this. Do it too long."
It's an immersion thing, right? It doesn't make you faster, but it's cool, and it just kind of adds to the immersion for me, and it's fun to tinker with. And then maybe in 6 months I'll move it someplace else or whatever.
That's why you got a butt kicker.
I do. I like that a lot. On road racing, the butt kicker is amazing because you can feel the curves. And on ovals, I have wheel slip up, so I can feel when, and especially in the B car, when the car's in yaw, you can feel it in your butt. You can feel it skipping across the track. So I actually find the butt kicker helps. I don't know, make you faster, but it gives you a better feel.
Yeah, I like the curb when you hit the curbs, like in road racing, clipping the curbs, it doesn't. But anyway, guys, I think that's going to be it for the podcast tonight. David, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. I know it's late for you guys. Appreciate it.
Yep. Guys, that's all we have tonight. We appreciate everybody tuning in, and we appreciate the team for showing up and being here and participating. Tracy's been sick and under the weather. So Trace, thanks for putting in what you did tonight.
That's better. Cool. Hopefully next week I feel a little better.
Yep. Scotty, Robert, guys, appreciate y'all being here as well. And all the viewers tune in. They want to see you guys each and every week as well. And guys, thank you for tuning in. If you haven't done so yet, we just ask you hit that subscribe button. We are appreciate every subscription we get. Bell icon gets you notified anytime that we put up new content here on the channel or go live. And give us a thumbs up, like on the podcast if you like the podcast tonight. And if you appreciate David coming on to talk about all this stuff with us, give him a thumbs up too. And down in the description below, all kind of cool stuff for you guys. There's a promo code for Major's Garage. We get a small commission off your first month's subscription if you click on the link there. We got a 10% off promo code to Maconi Setup Shop he gave for you, our viewers. And then we got there's 3 places you can get free sets down there to start building on. Major's Garage offers their Baseline Plus sets. You've got we got a link to osracing.net, which offers oval sets, both asphalt and dirt. And then Edwards Setup Shop is a huge Discord community where they have sets that they put up for you guys. The community can upload setups, and it's a good place to go get some stuff to start with and start building on and race with. It's stable, better than a lot of the stock iRacing setups. So go check that stuff out. And if you want a custom diecast model made of your iRacing car, there's a dude in the description who's got his Facebook page link there, and you can hook up with him and send him your TGA file for iRacing. He can get you a custom diecast model made of your iRacing car. All that cool stuff is down in the description for you guys. We appreciate each and every one of you being with us. For me and everyone here at Area 51, we appreciate you guys all each and every week. And as always, we will see you in the next
Next one.
Yeah.